counterpoint is I'm not a fucking monster normally, so you know.
Yeah, you think I'm yelling. The critical part is you think I'm yelling. That's just me being passionate. Like, you have no idea. You've actually never seen me yell.
John's
my,
shitty, and
my
it
wife in the
can't be.
background. Yeah, you haven't. You actually have not seen me yell. You have not seen Danielle. Hey, Danielle. That'll be
Hmm.
my trans
Sounds
name.
like a pretty name.
Thank you. That'll be my trans name.
My son's name is Dexter, but his full name is Dexter Rowe, so we call him Dextero.
Badass. Now, see, that's a
Sounds
badass
like a
name.
superhero.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. All right, so Sorite's paradox, right? It works like this. You're standing on a beach. You see a heap of sand. The heap of sand is about 5 foot tall, right? And it's about, I don't know, 7 feet wide. Nice sand mound, right? So you want to figure out exactly when does it stop being a heap of sand. So you start plucking away one grain of sand at a time. At what point does it actually stop? What is the number of grains of sand? What is the point that it transitions from being a heap of sand to just sand on the beach? And the point of the paradox is if you sit down and try to work it out in your head, you really can't. Because clearly there's a distinct object we call a heap of sand, and there's the distinct object we just call sand, and then there's the sand on the beach itself, a third thing. Even though they're all made up of the same constituent parts, sand. But there's no clear dividing line when it transforms. And it becomes a pedantic game to say at 5 million grains of sand, it's just sand on the beach. But at 5,000,001 grains of sand, we've got ourselves a heap, people.
Yeah,
Wouldn't it
and
just be at the level where it's not flat anymore?
How many
yeah,
grains
but
of
like
sand is that?
what's the scientific measurement of not flat? At that
That's
point,
true.
you've just changed you've changed the goalpost, but it's the same game essentially.
Yeah,
Um,
the game doesn't
another
change.
another I guess I don't know. I guess it would be less abstract, but it's still really abstract version of that is the ship of Theseus, which is let's say you set sail on a wooden ship, and in the hold are a bunch of planks of wood and all the material that you would ever need to build another ship. So you decide we're just going to keep sailing forever, or as long as we can, and bit by bit, plank by plank, you replace the ship. So one plank at a time, you pull it up, you put a new plank in. You do this everywhere for every bit of the ship that exists, and you just throw the old.
At what point is it a new ship?
At what point is it a new
Yeah, that's
ship?
what I was gonna say.
Yeah, and you
Yeah.
just throw that shit into the ocean. Otherwise, you can't answer that question. There's no real answer to that question. I mean, I think there's like legal. I think legally there might be answers to that question. I'm not sure, but
Yeah,
any
it's when
I
you
ain't
change
no
the VIN number.
lawyer.
that might be it. It's sort of like the fucking. Are you guys familiar with what is it? Is it 79% kits or whatever?
Yeah. Yeah, 70% lowers. They're fucking awesome.
What is that?
So you cannot buy an unregistered gun, but you can buy something called a 70% lower, which is 70% of a gun, and they have all sorts of different versions of these.
Mm-hmm.
They're legally not a gun, but if you buy even if you have like a decent hand drill, you can mill it out and turn it into a gun.
Sounds like a lovely little loophole there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, like, what's the actual amount? It's like you need to be like 80% done with it, right? So they call them like 79% kits or something like that.
They're 80% kits is what they call them, but yeah.
Oh, they call them 80% kit. Yeah, so like the fact that they like drew a distinction there is just like them feeling under pressure to draw a line, right? I mean, it doesn't mean that it's literally true because there's no way to actually make that true. It's not scientifically true that that it is or isn't a gun when you fucking drill into it one tiny bit to get from 79% to 80% or whatever. Or
Reminds
80.
me how. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good.
It reminds me how weed isn't legal to sell in this state, but you can buy a sticker and you can get a donation.
Right.
Yeah, it's
Gifted.
it's these pedantic jackass games in linguistics and science that like who was famous for that? There were two actually. Surprising duo of people agree on this one. Um, if you set the premise to a bag of flour, right? If you go to the store and you pick up a bag of flour, there's a chance that it says it's a pound bag of flour, right? But if you were to if you were to measure it on a scale, you put one bag of flour on, it comes up to 0.997 pounds. And you put another one on, it's 1.002, right? And the problem is that A does not equal A. And the the resolution, at least for me, right, in my ethics is it's a fucking bag of flour, you pedantic jackass. Just fucking buy a bag of flour or don't. This is really pointless.
Interestingly, they a lot of companies will account for that, and when they say it's a pound bag of flour, they will average it out to like 1.01 or 1.1 or 1.2 pounds, so that
Yeah,
they average ahead of the curve.
that's because two very famous people actually like have that same problem that A does not equal A. It's Ayn Rand and Trotsky.
Who else?
Trotsky.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's jackassery. But Trotsky was okay. Trotsky was a very smart guy. He was a very good general, but he could think himself into just being a complete jackass when he absolutely tried. And shucks howdy, he was good at that.
Mhm.
Fucking terrible. By the way, this is the Sons of Trier live stream and podcast. I'm Dan Cohen. I'm joined by John Sinclair,
Yep.
Cenk Engels, and Maeillory.
Maeillory, what's up?
Cool. All right, did an intro. See, bam. Look at that.
Mhm.
Smooth. Goes down smooth like this full throttle I'm drinking. Not sponsored, but we could be Coke. You just need to start paying me in offensive bottles.
Oh, wait,
Gotta
we're
start
doing
putting
Coke
the
now?
cocaine back in.
Yeah.
We need to put that like ridiculous grape drink that True messaged in group chat. We need to get sponsored by them.
Wouldn't that be badass?
Pharmaceutical one.
What was that shit? I was
That
making
was
fun of it.
that was some of the wildest grape drink I've ever seen. I do not
Pharmaceutical
remember.
purple drink.
Goose drink. That's what that was.
That's literally what it's called. It's goose drink.
Yeah.
Oh man.
It's a burst of goose and grape. It'll give you all the raw fighting skills of a goose with a smooth grape flavor.
No, I'm looking at it now. The flavor, gyrating goose grape.
Part of me wants to feel like that's gooseberry and grape. Part of me
No.
knows it's true goose.
Yeah. Goose grape. It's the most powerful grease known to man. It's also the hardest to acquire because goose are serial killing monsters. So this is not.
You ever met a turkey?
Yeah, I fought a couple turkeys in my day. I come from New Florence, PA. I fought a couple of turkeys. I've certainly wrestled a dog bigger than a German Shepherd. But the geese, they don't fight fair. All right, they don't fight fair.
Dogs are
Come at you
babies.
with a vengeance.
Yeah, we're talking a real kind of like you threw a rock, so they called it an airstrike.
Yeah, that is 100% how they are.
I'm gonna put it out there. Thanks to geese, I had to grow up behind a wall, and they took the high ground. They built a bunch of
Reminds
roads.
me of something.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, it was very, very terrible. They're backed by the U.S. Army.
Do they come into your place of worship?
They did actually. They fucking Faith Lutheran Church. Geese went in, guns a-blazing. Yeah, it's bad. They were letting civilian geese run over us with cars. So absolute fucking war criminals, geese. Eradicate the whole of them. They're birds, right? Yeah, they're birds. Just eradicate them.
Is there a deeper meaning to this?
No, this has nothing to do with the news. This has nothing to do with it. Shit.
Just geese.
Yeah, it's just geese. Just awful fucking Canadian geese that the Canadians and the Europeans and the Americans all conspired back in the 40s to push into fucking Pennsylvania to get them away from everybody else.
Why do you keep explaining specifically how Canadian they are?
Yeah, they're very Canadian.
Are you trying to like tie something together to those Canadian geese?
Very Canadian, if you get my drift. A lot of funny hats. Funny hat Canadian.
Weird accents.
Weird, very weird accents.
They don't really speak the English language.
They do, but it's
Doesn't sound quite right.
Hey,
It's not American.
Their accent sounds like they're trying to get away with something. They're up to something.
Anyways, if everybody was curious, the analogy that we're making is to Italy and Gladio operations.
Thank you.
so actually, that lined up basically perfectly. Yeah, no, this is not in a safe space for Italian Americans or actual Italians, for what that's worth.
Lot to unpack there. Yeah. I mean,
French supremacy.
fuck the French.
No,
It's in the same pot.
Yeah,
not them
fuck the
either.
French. Yeah. Listen, I'm gonna tell you. You want to know what happened in Notre Dame?
Oh,
Does it?
go ahead.
Can we
go
blame
ahead.
the geese?
A couple of geese were up there smoking cigarettes, pissed off at their union steward that they were only on their third cigarette break for the hour. And the top of Notre Dame, my friend, is just lined with dead Jews they've hidden. And
Whoa.
oil rags and dead Jews turns into one big fire.
Yeah.
So no French people either.
That
Actually,
got a little dark.
yeah. Well, we're talking about geese, man. Geese are a dark subject. Just fucking evil ass birds. No, actually, you know what? Honestly, I'm gonna make the claim here. I think Israel was the fucking the extracted methodology of how they decided to like fucking do Gladio and shit like that, and how they did all the South American coups, because it is the single most effective one.
Well, I mean, they had Israel's the confluence of a lot of things. I want to
Yeah.
open the subject by saying, just reiterating the fact that Dan and I are Jews, and it's okay
Yeah.
that we talk about this, and that if you call us anti-Semitic Jews, you're actually being anti-Semitic
Mhm.
because you're calling us a self-hating Jew, which is a bad stereotype, and
Mhm.
thus what ends up happening is when one Jew calls another Jew anti-Semitic, it gets into this sort of like reverse flux of energy where
Mhm.
you're both anti-Semitic, because
Mhm.
what ends up happening is one Jew A accuses Jew B of being anti-Semitic. Jew B says, no, you're
Mhm.
calling me a self-hating Jew. That's anti-Semitic. At which point, Jew B has accused Jew A of being anti-Semitic, which is anti-Semitic. And as a result, there is this like negative flux of energy that
Mhm.
basically it's perpetual motion. It's perpetual motion racism. And it's really, I mean, it manages to just, in terms of discourse, be sort of a negative black hole. It's really,
I mean, it
very impressive.
instantly stops all conversation. I will say that is the most Jewish conversation I've ever heard.
I was gonna, yep.
By the way, guys, how was my supportive silk to John?
You're doing a very good. Yeah,
Great.
That added a lot to it, I really think.
Mhm.
You know, I also want to point out the fact that calling a Jewish duo who are grifters Diamond and Silk is anti-Semitic. So the idea that we're diamond merchants, that's
I
not
can't wait. I can't wait to find out how I'm anti-Semitic today.
well,
Me
it's
too.
actually
Next.
I'll give everyone a hint. It's because I think that we shouldn't be murdering Palestinians.
Well, that's
Well-
one. The other problem is that you tend to Jew-splain capitalism to the masters of capitalism. So, you know, you don't Jew-splain, you mansplain capitalism
It's-
to Jews, which is, according to the
No, I
anti-Semite,
mean-
that's our thing. So,
so the thing about
How you doing that?
anti-Semitism.
how you doing that? How you doing that?
Eh.
Oh, okay.
So- This is sort of a wide a wide-ranging subject.
What, your ass?
What?
Your ass?
No, not quite.
I got his
Not quite.
ass. I got
No,
his ass. Oh, come on, that was good. Yeah, I got you. You're just like, well, I do. Oh, Dan just did an anti-Semitism. There we go.
Oh, we're really gonna rack him up tonight.
Oh my god.
Anyway,
I'm drinking a full throttle so I can stay the full night going full right to a blue color.
so one aspect of this I've also noticed is that you can almost go full spoony with this topic, whereas you can't quite. I think disability sort of enters a new realm where like there's both a hierarchy of disability, but also so many people are disabled that not being ableist, or excuse me, to not be ableist is also incredibly difficult. But then to also identify as disabled enters yourself into a rigid hierarchy. Not quite the same with Judaism. The main difference is that you're not necessarily entered into that rigid hierarchy because Orthodox Jews might like there to be a rigid hierarchy for that stuff, but there isn't necessarily. The main difference, the main similarity between ableist rhetoric and anti-Semitic rhetoric is that it's very difficult to not be anti-Semitic by certain metrics. The same way it's very difficult to not be ableist by certain metrics. And yeah, so
I have an admission to make.
What's up?
I've built a secret Twitter just to follow Spoonie.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Isn't she hot?
It's not quite as fun as I was expecting it to be. I still don't like Twitter.
She drops the bombs every now and then, but mostly it's not that bad.
My personal favorite thus far has been COVID is proof that we are all just have been ableist this whole time, because we could have fixed all of these problems for people who are disabled years ago, but it took the world, having a problem before we actually fixed any of their problems. Work from home and all these other things.
There.
It's like a really shitty take that's like still technically food.
It conflates ableism with capitalism.
Sure, that's definitely what I would expect you to say to that.
That's the problem. Like
that checks out.
Well, I mean, really though, like the problem is you can't conflate ableism for capitalism. Ableism is a very specific thing under capitalism. Like you wouldn't confuse a car door for a car, right? Like one piece of the car does not make it. Surely, Cenk, you agree with that? Like a door does not make a car. So like, but if you don't have a door on that car, it's not gonna look like a car too well.
How many doors do we need before we get to a full car?
At least 2.
No, I mean, the issue with Spoonie is treating politics as just being like you're mad calling customer service, because that's been the main way that she's interacted politically. So
hold on. You wait, please. A ton of responses to this absolutely fucking sick. I do not blame non-Jews for being wary about talking to Jews about this topic, because the entire Zionist lobby has very successfully convinced a shit ton of people that Zionism equals anti-Semitism, and that anti-Zionism equals anti-Semitism. This is Spoonie. Oh, I love you. Excuse me, Zionism equals anti-Semitism. No, she's on our side. Fuck, never mind. That wasn't as funny as I hoped. I misread that.
Aw.
God damn.
I'm sorry for you.
You know what? Thank you. This is sad. I was hoping to get a really hot take from her that everything is pro-Jew. That would have been amazing.
Again, just for my regular clarification, I'm not anti-Spoonie. I'm anti the image of Spoonie that I've created in my head. It's a very different thing, apparently.
I mean, she had her hottest take about Judaism was definitely the one where she was like, if you identify as Jewish, what was it? It was something along the lines of like, if you identify as Jewish solely based on blood, then I think you're like being Jewish wrong or something like
Yeah,
that.
it was.
And
It was you have to have blood and the religion.
well, she didn't.
Yeah.
I think what she implied, which is like sort of a naive take that some Jews have about this, because okay, so if you take her position to be genuine, and this is actually an interesting lens to explore Zionism and like the Israel-Palestine situation through, which is that her sort of liberal or left belief about it, a lot of naive Jews have this, is okay, well, one of the things that makes the Israeli government really bad is that they actually do care about blood, and they're actually being white supremacist, because again, they don't
It's entirely race based.
yeah, because well, what ends up happening there is if you're an Ethiopian Jew, I actually know an Ethiopian Jew from one of the hand job camps that I went to, which we can talk about that at some point. Those are sick.
For the record, he went there at age 28. So
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
The absolute personal sacrifice you went through by saying those words in that way.
yeah,
That's a whole other subject.
Yeah, you didn't know about. I'm surprised you didn't know about the hand job camps, dude.
Oh, are you talking about? Are you talking to Cenk?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Why
would I?
Why would I need to tell you
that?
that?
Jewish. Why would he? So
you gotta listen
anyway.
to Come Town, bro. All they do is talk about hand job camps and other camps because Nick's he's spicy.
So to get back to it, if you're an Ethiopian Jew, there's a large pocket of Ethiopian Jews. If you're an Arab Jew, which is to say that if you're a Jew who, after the Romans kicked most of, not all of, most of the Jews out of the Kingdom of Israel, which is distinct from modern Israel for what that's worth. The Kingdom of Israel is what you read in Bible school, or alternatively, Christian hand job camp.
Right.
And
it was. I can confirm. That's what that was.
So, if you read about those,
I too was 28 when I attended.
Does that mean I get to start going next year?
Next year, you get to go give some 14-year-olds some HJs.
Legally, these are jokes. We would never condone such a thing.
Of course.
This is now a pro Jeffrey Epstein podcast.
Well, as we know about that, with that take about beauty, Jeffrey Epstein was actually the victim of those. Children because he was
no. We got to save that one. I want to because actually, Coffee Spoonie agrees with her, so we got a great take coming.
Okay, I'll get back to subject here. Basically, the Israeli government. It is very difficult to immigrate to Israel if you're not a white Jew. It's much more difficult to prove your heritage to a sufficient degree to them because they look at your heritage and they're like, oh, well, you're not Ashkenazi, so we're gonna make this more fucking difficult.
Yeah.
And let's see. Yeah, so it's pretty explicitly white supremacist because again, many Arab Jews live in Palestine, but they don't actually give a fuck about those people. So the idea that it's some sort of utopia for Jews across race is pretty inaccurate. And what Spoonie states when she says, if you identify by Jewish by being blood, or if you identify as Jewish by blood, then I don't think that you're like doing being Jewish correct. She more is talking about the fact that in the cultural heritage of Judaism, the only thing that it takes to be Jewish is that your mother is Jewish and that her mother was Jewish, etc., etc.
Yeah.
It's matriarchal it's
matrilineal.
Matrilineal, not fratrilineal.
Extremely patriarchal.
Yes.
Extremely.
Excuse me. So yeah, that's naive on her part, because as far as I'm concerned, one of the things about whiteness is that whiteness is definitely an invented concept. There's no white country. That doesn't exist. There's an Italian country. There's an Irish country.
Listen, you grew up. I know you're from New York. You have heard of Vermont. Come on, don't be like that.
That would be
So-
Vermontinian, though.
No.
Not quite, but
Excuse me, sir. Words are made up. It's Vermontinian.
Sure.
Excuse you.
Anyway, so yeah, these distinctions, yeah. So with whiteness, there's no white country. It's an invented concept to distinguish between basically Europe and everyone else to justify colonialism. And you know, this is it's not an ethno-nationalistic idea, but basically
Because the best part is they'll justify it,
Because
right?
it's-
Like they'll
well,
tell you that. Ask any white person if they're white. They're like, no, I'm Italian.
well, I mean, they'll
True.
avoid the subject, or the rhetorical trick nowadays is to Elizabeth Warren it and insist that you're like 2%.
1/16 Cherokee.
Yeah, you're like 2% Cherokee. Like, you know what? I don't understand how anyone could have the gall to fucking do that, honestly. Because I'm like 2% Chinese. I would never ever in my fucking life go around talking about how I'm APPI or whatever.
I do.
Like,
I talk about
except
using
on a
APPI all the
podcast
time.
for humor's sake.
Yeah.
yeah, I would never. That just it blows my mind anyone can do that. But anyway, more to the point here. So yeah, whiteness originally tended to mean like that you were like a WASP, which means like you were like some sort of British or Dutch or
German. Prussian
German or
specifically.
French.
A point of order, I misspoke. It's Prussian. You had to be Prussian, English, or you had to be Dutch.
We all know that this has changed over a long period of time. For a very long time, Italian people, this is not a safe space for Italians, but I'll make this point. I'll cape for them for a second. For a long time, Italian people and Irish people, look, you want to make the point they weren't treated as poorly as black people. That's fair. They weren't. They weren't slaves. They weren't chattel slaves. But they were
Right.
certainly treated as second or third class citizens. They were not treated well. And
Hell, Benjamin Franklin thought the beer swilling Schwabians were too lowbrow and too disgusting to be American human beings, and they should not be let into America. And a Schwabian is, by modern standards, a Southern German. So the Germans
Yeah.
weren't white enough for Ben Franklin. I want you to really wrap your head around that.
No,
Yeah.
the Southern Germans.
Yeah, well, that's why
You're not giving old Ben Franklin a fair shake here.
In Franklin's defense, the conception at that point, I would believe, is that they were Schwabians, Bavarians, and then Prussians, among others.
You know, and of course, like Ireland was essentially, and some may even say still is, a colony of Britain.
It is.
So that was all very unfortunate as well. You want to make the argument that they weren't treated the way African American slaves were, or just, excuse me, slaves in general as a result of colonization. You're totally right about that. However, to say that they've always been white is not accurate. Now, why is this important? This is important because at one point, the Italians were discriminated against, and so were Irish people, and then they stopped being at some point, at least in the melting pot that is the United States. Maybe you still get shit in Europe over it, but it's not nearly the same. It's not even close, honestly. In fact, you know, I mean, like, honestly, if any European country that's like part of the EU or whatever, like Poland gets it the worst or whatever, and that like wasn't necessarily always true. Anyway, all of this is to say,
Well, that wasn't always true because there wasn't always a Poland. Poland actually is a construct of the nation-state building process. Like,
yeah, that is fair.
Poles were just Slavs. Like, that's when people talk about like Polish national pride or whatever. I just want to smack them with a fucking newspaper and be like, "You're a Slav. They hate you too. Shut up." Like,
So yeah,
dumb fucking.
why does this matter? It matters because at one point these people were not white, and then they became white, and the same process is basically true for Jews. However, Jews getting to be white wasn't really their decision. It was something that they were allowed to become by the greater body that is whiteness, right?
To be very fair, actually, the Slavs and the Jews really do share something here, because Jews are white when it's convenient, and Jews are definitely not white when it's convenient. That is the stain of Oriental despotism. That's one of the problems with being Slavic or being Jewish. You actually fall in the same hybrid category of you're only white when it's beneficial to whites. And to some extent, Italians fall. I don't think so much anymore, but Italians used to fall into that until they interbred a lot with English people, and it becomes a nominal distinction. But that's largely because Sicilians are dark-skinned and actual like Northern Italians are white.
Yeah. So,
White
but
skin.
the thing about it is that, like, at the very least, in that scenario, it's not your choice if you're white or not.
Right.
And why does this matter? This matters because when it comes to Spoonie being like, well, you're if you're identifying as Jewish by blood, then I don't consider you a Jew, right? And that's what she's saying.
Right.
Or she's at least saying that can't be the metric that you use. And that would suggest, in her worldview, that I have a friend. I will not use his name on the podcast. However, my friend, his father's side is like 100% Jewish. His mother's side is Polish. When he got a DNA test, he came back like 60% Jewish.
Yep.
So, under Spoonie's worldview, he is not Jewish. However, if there were pogroms on the Upper West Side, as we saw that take today, he would fucking get the pogrom on him because he's a Jew by that standard. So here's the thing: in Spoonie's worldview, by that standard, he is both a Jew and not a Jew.
Right.
He's enough of a Jew to get massacred, but he's not a Jew to like. So what race is he? Because he's no longer white at that point.
He's obviously
Schrodinger's race.
Schrodinger's Jew.
Perfect.
Yep. Oh, again, Schrodinger's Slavs. Hell, Asians, light-skinned Asians are going through that now. Actually, they're finding out the hard way that there's a big division in thinking on Asian peoples, right? Because if you're dark-skinned Asian, easy enough. They just rate you as some weird firm of black people, and they're just racist to you. But if you're light-skinned, turns out, and you really are invested in supporting white supremacy because you know that, this primarily applies to rich ones, obviously, but, because that benefits you, right? Suddenly, you're white adjacent, magically, you don't, the standards whiteness uses is obviously just aesthetic. You don't look anything like them. But for this purpose, sure. And when it's inconvenient for you to be white, guess what, asshole? Welcome to the club. Schrodinger's white person. And thankfully, Spoonie agrees with that worldview. Jackass.
That tracks.
Yeah. I do like that phrase, Oriental despotism. I just want to point that out. Oh.
A distinction that I would like to make is that these things tend to work in a sort of last hired, first fired situation, which means that
weird.
Yeah. Like, if they accept you as being white, they're going to reject you as being white eventually. And now, of course, or you'll be the first on the chopping block, which means that it does make sense to expand definition of whiteness, but that's not something white people like doing. So, there's some speculation back and forth about this. You see an expansion of specifically Mexican Americans voting for Trump, or voting for Republicans or whatever, being more conservative or whatever. And there's speculation that, they're willing to discriminate against Central Americans and darker Latino people.
Absolutely.
Will they eventually get to join whiteness? It's hard to conceive of now of that kind of situation happening, but it's at least in theory possible, because to a white person, turn of the century or whatever, the idea that an Irish person would ever be considered white was completely off the table. So I do think that's an interesting part of this concept.
Ideologically, they were a lot more rigid about it.
Mhm.
It was a lot. There was a lot less muddying the waters in the media and cultural circles. Like that was a very concrete idea at that point of what whiteness was. Again, yes, of course, social contracts, blah 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 blah. But in modern terms, like let me prove to you, if you will, that whiteness has to be a social construct, right? Look at Raphael fucking Cruz Jr. Fucking, he's literally a fucking Cuban born to Cuban refugees in another country in a community where there's a fucking bunch of Cuban refugees. Yet he's like the whitest kid you fucking know. Like he's literally by there is no measurement where you would call him white under a good 1900s fucking phrenology racist definition of whiteness. But these things change, identity shifts. Yeah, it turns out the Jewish question wasn't so fucking anti-Semitic after all, because it's right. It's the cultural context. These things aren't fucking cemented hegemonic ideas unless you fucking, accept the
Cemented
premises of racism.
So 100 years ago, I wasn't that white, I guess.
No,
No.
you,
I'm
as a fellow Slav, because I am a Slavic Jew, that's why I look somewhere between Zizek and Mark Maron. I really do. You've all seen my Facebook. Obviously, I do. Like, I look somewhere between there. It's because I'm a Slavic Jew, and yeah, Slavs we just eat shit. We're in a weird category because again, we're only white whenever it's convenient.
Mhm.
Are
Well, I'm
we?
also Irish, so like, what the fuck? My brain is just melting.
Yeah, good news. In 1900, you really weren't white.
Fuck.
Yeah, neither was I.
you basically are now, unless you're very specifically Catholic Irish in Northern Ireland. So
Yeah.
then
Really
definitely-
specific.
Yeah, then maybe you're not considered white, depending on who you talk to.
Or if you're Scottish, Scots are considered dogs under European law. I
Oh,
don't think it's
I
right.
mean-
I'm just pointing it out. The Eurozone is incredibly bigoted to the Scots.
Well, it's just because they're Scottish. If they
Yeah.
weren't so Scottish, it wouldn't be so bad for them.
The Scots eat terrible, but they're a beautiful people. They're like again, they're like Jews. It's weird how those similarities play out. We eat like shit, but we're beautiful people.
So this gets back to Israel in the sense that, one of the things that I think people, I guess, forget about Israel is that, like, it came into existence because, like, other European countries were like, oh, we can't wait to get rid of our Jews.
Hey, and America.
Yeah.
And America.
Who had the money post-war to answer the Jewish question with a good old-fashioned ethnic cleansing through deportation? America. And who paid the bill for Europe to get rid of their surplus population problem? America. Let's blame who's at fault. I'm tired. Full fucking disclosure, I'm tired as a Jewish man for never getting to count to be Jewish when it's cool and always having to eat shit whenever fucking Benjamin Netanyahu or some other Israeli right-wing fucking asshole decides to act like a complete piece of fucking trash and a war criminal. That's America's fault. That's not my fault. That's the fucking nation state of America who started that shit. In fact, of all fucking people, Biden, you can find this on YouTube. Biden goes out there and he's like, if there wasn't an Israel, we should make it. We needed a colony in the region that we could dump arms into and keep the savages at bay. On the floor of fucking Congress. And I don't think I fucked that up too bad.
So
Sounds like a direct quote.
I think he didn't say savages. I think that's the thing I fucked up, but he certainly meant it. Captain Osmosis.
So, yeah, it basically it was in the British colonial interest to have control over the region, even when they disengaged Palestine as being a colony. And one of the most effective ways of doing that was, one of the things they did was they promised it to the Ottomans and the Jews who were living there at the time, and themselves and various other colonial powers. So they promised it to all three of them, and then they supported the Jews who were living there. Now, and then after supporting them militarily, basically allowed them to have it. And also helped facilitate more Jews moving there. So you might ask yourself, well, what were European Ashkenazi Jews doing in Israel at that time in the first place? And it all goes back to a person named, I hope I get his name right, Theodor Herzl, who was the founder of the idea of Zionism. And my understanding of it is basically after the Dreyfus Affair and after German Jews got stripped of citizenship, this was before, I believe this was before World War I, actually. He wrote a book or a pamphlet that basically asserted, okay, Jews need like a homeland because they need a homeland because they're never going to not get treated as Jews wherever they are. There will always be other no matter what. And if they don't have a homeland, then we can't guarantee Jewish safety worldwide.
Yeah, hold on.
And
Joe Biden, Senate session, June 5th, 1986. Somebody found the clip. Thank God. Shout out to Nasruddin Rahman. It's the best $3 billion investment we make. Were there not an Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel to protect our interests in the region.
now this also gets to, okay, so like there are a couple things that were just like wrong with Herzl's like assertion, which just ends up being like, again, I'm not sure if the concept of whiteness was completely developed as we have it now at that time, but he probably, because at the time also Irish and Italian people were not considered white, he had a hard time envisioning the idea of whiteness expanding a whole lot to include Jews even. And that's just wrong. It obviously did expand to that. And we can see that. Now, he would also make the assertion, well, we only ascended to that because Jews have a homeland. And I think the shit with Mexican people that's happening today, Mexican Americans specifically, who are trying or attempting to integrate into whiteness by basically just taking it out on Central Americans. At least that's the trend of it that I've come to understand and heard about. Would suggest no, that's not the case. I mean, it's not exactly like, you know, Mexican people are a distinct race that have their own ethno-state or whatever. So the idea that like it requires that for them to be able to join whiteness appears to just be untrue. And even that end of it is getting disproven. So I do think at least that's an interesting facet of it. Now again, my understanding of the history at that point is that basically the British give it over to the Jews and make it like not Kingdom of Israel, the State of Israel at that point in 1948. Or excuse me, not in 1948. Excuse me. They hand it over to the Jews, and the Arabs who live in the region are very mad about this and revolt. And there's a revolt for about 3 years, from about 36 to 39, and they lose because Israel was given a lot of military support by Britain and the United States. And the modern state of Israel comes in being in 1948. Now, I'm skipping over a lot. Any pedantic person in the comments or whatever would say that I missed a whole lot of history, but that's the gist of what ended up happening.
Might I add, you can suck it if you say that. Like, this is not a fucking history podcast. We're not going to go by the fucking minutes. Shut up. You need a basic narrative to understand it.
What's important here, though, is that 1,000% Israel could not have existed if it was not for the military support of the United States and England.
Absolutely not.
100% would not exist without those things. And the fact of the matter is, and I want to get into this sort of thing where they're doing sort of you can assert they're doing a slow motion ethnic cleanse, because as far as they're concerned, this is a good place to put Jews. So we don't have to resolve the Jewish question violently. We can just put them over there. Now, the shape of that has changed over time, but I believe the thinking of it was that at the time. And we'll have a colony or an equivalent to a colony over there for our strategic needs.
Yeah,
And
it had fallen out of favor of calling it a colony at that point.
And I got some bad news for everybody. Look, the fact of the matter is that if you think that like the United States is Israel's ally because they support a Jewish state and they like think Zionism's a good idea and they like love Jews, it's just patently wrong. Because if Israel ever threatened the United States' interests in the region, in any capacity, and I mean their economic interests specifically,
It's
especially
oil and gas.
That
especially
sweet, sweet oil.
What?
if Israel became the leftist project that a lot of the people who participated in kibbutzim or kibbutz wanted. And I want to circle back just for a second as to why were there so many Ashkenazi Jews living in Israel at the turn of the century when for most of, Palestine, it was Palestine at the time. Why were there so many Jews living in Palestine at that time when for most of Palestine's history, that is after the Roman diaspora, when it ceased to be the Kingdom of Israel, why were European Jews living there then? And the answer is that many of them read Theodor Herzl's book or pamphlet. It's actually a pamphlet, and decided this is a good idea. We're going to relocate there. We're going to start our own farms. We're going to immigrate there. Importantly, they immigrated to that area. They didn't fucking. It was on a much more level playing field at that time, at least. They immigrated to the area to start kibbutzim, which is the plural of kibbutz, which is a farm, basically, a Jewish farm that existed in the area. They grew dates and various crops that can grow in that region.
When are we getting to the theory?
We're going to get there in a second.
Jesus.
What's important? Actually, no, I'm going to get you with it right now. One of two successful anarchist societies. Only two. One of two. And
how
then,
did it turn out? So what are we measuring success by?
To be fair,
Hold
they were
on.
not violently put down.
I'm guilty of this as well, so let me admit my guilt. There's no such thing as a successful or unsuccessful society. All you have is a dead government or a living one. So, what are you measuring success by? Cause look how it fucking turned out. You want to redact that reification error, buddy? You want to react that?
No. It was.
Oh, okay.
It was successful because it wasn't violently put down.
Oh, it was successful because it wasn't violently put down. Okay, what did it become?
It became a settler white supremacist colony.
Oh, look, anarchism gave way to settler colonialism. A bunch of dicking around in the woods. Turns out there's not enough order involved.
Fucking got him.
Statist.
Yeah, none of your shit turned out great either. Don't even.
What the fuck are you talking about? What the fuck are you even talking about? China's running the fucking planet right now, dude. Get owned.
You don't get to say that shit because a lot of the fucking purists would tell you that they're just capitalists now. What happened to them, Dan? They became capitalists. Oh, it was a tragedy. There you go.
Yeah. You know what? You know what the difference is?
Ideal.
You know what the difference is?
Way better than getting yelled at.
They're still standing, motherfucker. The Communist Party, CCCP, baby, still fucking standing. How about Cuba? Still fucking standing.
Capital's interests will expand to wherever, again, wherever the water runs smoothest, where the path of least resistance, even if that means through the Communist Party. So, and that's a Zizek quote. All right. Yeah. So don't even with that stuff. The only true communist society that's worked out is the Jusei ideal of North Korea.
All right.
So there you go.
Yes, correct. All right. Yes.
We're all libs. Kim Jong Un is the only non-lib. Maybe he'll come on our podcast one day.
Oh,
maybe.
I
thought he was on.
No, I'm not going to make fun of Supreme Leader Kim Jong Un. I have great respect for the Yuga ideal. I don't think it could apply everywhere, but I do believe that was a success.
Yeah.
How are you measuring that success?
Basically, well, I will give you an answer to that. I have a genuine answer to that. Here's the thing. The United States has been at war with it since 1950, and yet they still can't take them down. They've managed to build nukes, and they're fucking opening water parks. And, frankly, in terms of a clean society, they are leaps and bounds cleaner than us. That's just a fact. Like, even the CIA is like, yeah, it's a really clean society. It's really clean there. The streets are not fucking filthy like they are in every Western country where pigs just piss everywhere and shit. And then fucking poor homeless people are left sleeping out and having to piss. By pigs, I mean rich people, obviously. That shouldn't be a surprise.
What about the well-being of the citizens?
It's getting better. I think it's about to get. I mean, if you want me to be honest, I think COVID's really going to fuck it over because they've shut down their borders again. So they're not what limited trading they have access to because the United States government has decided that unilaterally they're not allowed to trade with anybody. So China, of course,
We've been doing the same shit with Cuba, and Cuba is a lot closer to being what you'd consider
as clean.
normal.
It's not as clean. I'm going to be frank. Plus, a lot of European countries told America to fuck off, and they trade with Cuba. Like, which shows you the fangs on fucking America, to be honest. But yeah.
Yeah, but China trades with North Korea, and China's fucking stronger than any of the countries that trade with.
Wait! I thought China was the #1 country. Didn't we just go over this?
Obviously, I forgot in a moment of fucking Western decadent madness about the Yucca ideal. So, like, yeah. Now, like, if you want me to be very honest, I think one of their major problems is the thing. Like, okay, the thing is, you can actually, relative to fucking America being at war with you for 50 years, you can do relatively well. You can acquire nukes, you can clean up your cities. I can still dislike the fact they do public executions, and the Yucca idealists have just gotten really pissed at me. But like, that's something they still do, and like, I don't think they
The river
should.
runs through it the other day.
There was never to be fair, at least by this metric. And listen, I know the fucking tankies are gonna get mad that I use the F word. And no, I don't mean the one that's a slur against gay people. And no, I don't mean fuck. I mean famine. So, there was the only non-wartime famine to have occurred in the 90s was in North Korea. None of that shit. There was never a famine in Cuba. So you can wring your hands about that. I like the socialist.
Here's the fact.
As Trump would say, I like the socialist countries without the famines, folks.
Oh, fuck you. I have an answer to that. Again, the answer is if you're getting embargoed by the United States, you can have a lot of fucking problems feeding people. And I am talking about Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un. I am not critiquing Kim Jong-il, who basically got that job because his dad died, and then he kicked the bucket like 2 decades later. Like
famous communism style too.
Yeah, I don't care for that. But again, I have my critiques. It's not a dogmatic admiration, but again, there are things about it that are genuinely like, all right, that's, in spite of everything, that's pretty fucking impressive. Like, I honestly believe they're going to be the first country to go like full solar power. Let's go.
Yeah, but like coal mining is a huge whatever. I don't even. This is not the point of this.
No,
I'm being drawn into an argument that doesn't need to happen anyway.
They're clearly going to do better than us, so shut up. Like, that's not even. And we're not going to do a theory on fucking solar power. The fact of the matter is that's where they're aiming at right now because they need a more sustainable power source.
So I do want to talk about this aspect of Zionism, just to bring it back to Zionism for a second. So
let's go from Yucca to Zionism. Let's fucking go.
So here's the main thing that is the problem, in my opinion, with Zionist thought, along with the problem with a lot of Pan-Africanist thought. I guess I'm gonna do a racism here.
Oh boy.
So Malcolm X, in one of his famous speeches, said, in order for Asian people and Chinese people to be respected across the world, the Chinese Revolution really helped in that. And that's because China became a world power. And that meant that you had to respect Chinese citizens no matter where they lived. And we need to do the same thing with Africa and make some country in Africa or the entire continent a world globe spanning power so that black people will be respected around the world.
I agree.
And Jews, the same thing is basically true with what Jews say about Israel, is that they need an ethno-state to be powerful so that Jews everywhere will be respected.
That's a categorical error, though. That's qualifying all Africans as one unified race. It's actually a complex, multinational, multi-tribal, multi-racial fucking setup, sir.
And Jews aren't multi-ethnic and multi-tribal,
multiracial.
Well, the other thing is that for Africa to do it, they will be doing it to spite the American Empire. For Israel to do it is entirely propped up by the American Empire. And
no, I think that if you if you buy the fact that race is a social construct, then the idea that like there need to be ethnostates is just it's just a threat. It's just a time bomb waiting to happen, because you're essentially asserting that without ethnostates there will be a war of all against all, but also ethnostates need to purge themselves of immigrants to a degree so that they will always maintain a certain racial or demographic balance, which means they need to defensively inflict violence on minorities within their borders.
Yeah, it's
But
replacement
also,
theory, right?
yeah, but also simultaneously, that's the only way to maintain world peace for minorities in other countries. It makes no sense. It's circular, because
Well,
you need to do violence to minorities to protect minorities. Is essentially what you're asserting with that. It doesn't make any fucking sense, and that's true. Because now listen, what's the dynamic that's missing here with what Malcolm X said
Well,
versus what with
okay.
Israel?
First off, X
Mhm.
made a categorical error with the Chinese Revolution because the Chinese are still a multi-ethnic, multiracial society, and
Yeah,
they also have a fucking problem with internal bigotry and internalized fucking aggression. Again, the
yes.
Uyghurs
There's a
really don't
lot
have
wrong
it
with that
coming.
statement.
Yeah, there's a lot wrong with it, but like the idea, the notion that does not it being wrong on the end of China does not actually undercut the idea that Africa needs to be a global power to stave off or fucking overthrow the shackles of European and American hegemony. Those two things are like those are separate problems, even though they're in the same statement.
But there, it's that thing about now. I actually do agree with the idea that like Africa needs to develop a large degree of independence from all of these different colonial holds that are still in it, or hooks that are still in it. I basically agree with just about everything about Africa becoming more powerful. In terms of individual nations and as a whole continent or whatever. But the idea that that will improve black people's lives globally, I think is flawed. And similarly to how it's flawed that fucking Israel improves Jewish people's lives everywhere.
No, well that there's no demonstrable evidence that it's true. It's demonstrable that the opposite is true. It's demonstrable.
Would you like to go ahead? Go ahead.
It's demonstrable that the existence of Israel in the form that Israel exists right now actually makes, obviously, number one, Palestinian lives worse. Number two, Arab lives worse writ large, because that's where all the memes about, Arabs being these fucking savage monsters. And number three, it makes Jews' lives around the world that much worse. Because what Israel does when so, hypothetically, right, to try to illustrate this for the people who are ardent Zionists, let's say there was an ethno-state in Asia. We'll call it Rapan for the sake of argument, and against its other Asian neighbors, it perpetuated race-based sexual and physical violence during a period. We'll just pin it somewhere. I don't know, the fucking 20s, the 1920s. I'm just picking it out of the blue.
Again, random time
Yeah,
periods.
random.
Purely random, just for the sake of argument. It would become very readily apparent that essentially using that as a place to launder Rapanese people from other countries back into that to empower it would be very bad, and it would be even worse if America was actively dumping money into that country to support those actions, right? Which has never happened.
We would never do that, of course.
Yeah, well, it didn't.
Never.
For my hypothetical, that's not what happened. But when you add the layer of, oh yeah, and it's at the behest of the American empire so they can dump their surplus population because they don't like those people, it makes it that much more hideous. So, readily speaking, no. And on top of that, let's say this hypothetical Rapan had all sorts of violations of the First Amendment associated with it. The right to peaceful assembly was violated. The right to free speech was violated, all in the name of supporting this hyper colony, right? Mm-hmm. We would easily condemn that. It would take absolutely nothing to condemn that country, right? And if there was an ideology called Ryanism, which is all about just Absolutely.
Rapanese people.
Yep, all over the Rapanese. And then, the idea is that within these communities, the wealthy within those communities would then go out and require of everybody below them in the hierarchy, the economic hierarchy, to pledge loyalty to Rapan and to admit that Rapan was first and foremost their homeland, and then offered incentives to go to Rapan, like, cool trips where you can go, get fucking head and hand jobs and shit, and you can women are prostituted prima facie because the goal is to lure males in to produce soldiers for Rapan, and the goal is to lure in more people to commit extrajudicial vigilante violence on behalf of Rapan, right? All of this stuff would be easily condemned. So, by extension, though, you also live in a world where the Rapanese are called all sorts of things. It's they kill babies, they kill women whenever they get the chance. They're sexual perverts. They steal wealth. They hoard wealth and distribute it to themselves at the expense of whatever place has Rapanese people in it. And it produces a lot of negative stereotypes for people who really have no interest in going to Rapan and just want a fucking sandwich. So yeah.
So
Just want a fucking sandwich.
I also want to just explore this bit here about how you need ethnostates to protect minorities, because that's basically what you're saying. And
whoa.
No, not you. I'm sorry, not you. I mean,
Yeah.
generally. I'm sorry, not you. Not you specifically. I'm sorry. That's not. That's the assertion about why ethnostates are good. Is that you need ethnostates to protect minorities globally, because if you didn't have an ethnostate of that minority's origin that was respected as a world power, then those people could be annihilated within the current country that they're in. But also, there's no end to the correct number of ethnostates, and like really that means that like you just have to destroy minorities everywhere, because it doesn't fucking end. Because you can justify it as your own. You as a people can justify it yourselves, but extrapolated out across the world, there would never be an end to ethnostates. Every country would be an ethnostate. And as we as we've explored with this topic of whiteness, it's last hired, first fired, which means that a necessary part of that ideology is that eventually you'll just find a new minority within. The minority was inside you the whole time, and you'll fucking continuously destroy them. It doesn't end as a cycle. There's no end to that sort of ideology.
LGBT has joined the chat.
So the thing that I wanted to explore with that is, that applies to Israel. There is no end to this assertion about Jews being needing an ethnostate, because ultimately a large part of what they're exploring is that they think that Jews should make aliyah. They think that there needs to be an ethnostate for Jews, and that Jews really can't be safe globally. And the religious right here wants Jews to move to Israel because they think it's going to accelerate the coming of the Messiah or whatever. There's not going to be an end to Jews going to Israel until there aren't Jews in other places. And at that point, first of all, Israel's not going to be safe from other countries that are near it, that are also presumably ethnostates in this scenario. And they will find more minorities, more lesser Jews within that they will oppress. I think these are things that are just sort of part of it. And the final point that I want to explore just about Zionism in general is that the counterpoint to Zionism against leftist Jews is that Jews are seeking a sort of world Zion through revolution. They think that you can get, I forget what the term, it's like the Messiah of the revolution. That instead of needing an ethnostate, instead of needing to go through the trouble of having a Zionist country, you can just get to a safe state for Jews through revolution, whatever that revolution may be, through a changing of the government wherever Jews are. And I will say a couple things to that. First of all, I don't think that this has made Jews safer in a way that's going to be long-term viable, because as we discussed,
Obviously not.
this is only going to make Jews less safe over time, if anything. Jews becoming. Go ahead.
No, yeah, come on. We gotta break this monologue up, dude. Come on. More back and forth. All right. So yeah, no, it's clearly not. If you were trying to combat the theory that everything you do is evil, that you hoard money and you fucking kill children, the two things that are going to make your life worse is somebody who ostensibly is part of your identity group is out there actively hoarding money and killing children. Like that's just prima facie obvious. Like that's it. It's guilt by association. That's what's happening. It's a very simple fallacy, but it's very effective.
The final point, though, that I wanted to make is that there have been revolutions that have happened that improved Jews' lives, and they didn't make everything perfect, but I think that is significantly more worth pursuing, if you will, than this project in general, which has just it has been completely misguided and is just a tool of the U.S. government at this point. The idea that Jews run this government is just so fucking stupid in the first place, that the idea that like Israel has too much like political influence over the United States government, there's truth to that, but only in the sense that it's really the other way around, in terms of the governments are so enmeshed and they're really just the same fucking government essentially, that is all controlled by the US, not Israel. That's the thing that's important about it. It's all controlled by and used for the interests of the United States, not Jews.
Right. It's all settler colonialism. And it's classic fucking European settler colonialism. There's really not even a fucking argument to be made that Israel is a unique and independent state. There's not. It's just a colony. Like it is state number 51. We would be better off putting it. Actually, no. We can leave it as a colony because I don't want the right wing of fucking Israel influencing the Senate even more, because that is a parasitic relationship. When you have these colonial structures, you have a situation where immediately, right? Obviously, the colonial power has all of the power in the situation. But the perpetrators of colonial violence tend to be boots on the ground, and in this case, they are really a subsection of, at least originally, they were a subsection of these foreign countries who were funneling to this colonial project completely out of ethnic cleansing concerns. What happens then is if you look at India, you see a very striking similarity. The local Raja or Raj or whatever, right? I don't speak Hindi, so I apologize, but the local leadership does actually wield an incredible amount of influence with the colonizers because of the parasitic relationship of it. Without the local leadership, the colony can't fucking thrive and do its purpose because there's no day-to-day decision making then. And without the colonizer, the fucking imperial power, the local leader really doesn't have that much of a fucking foothold because they're not wanted, right? There's some significant portion that's resisting it. And if you will, in Israel, that's been perfected because there's like, if you look at the fact that Netanyahu's trouble forming a government for more than 2 fucking weeks, it's always because people who want to commit more genocide are chomping at the bit to get into that spot.
Yeah, the only actual reason, just to break into their actual politics just for a second, the only actual reason that he is having the trouble that he's having now is that there is a broad liberal coalition there, which, and by liberal, by the way, I mean they want to do all the same things that he's doing in relation to the situation with Israel and Palestine, except they want the settlements to grow at a slower pace, and they think that Netanyahu is like politically corrupt. He's like been convicted of all this stuff, and that he's not polite enough.
All of their fucking prime minister. Yeah, he's Trump. He is Trump.
Yeah, he's Trump.
But the fallacy is that every one of their prime minister, like Netanyahu, is somehow unique. Every single one of them has been like fucking Netanyahu.
So importantly, the reason that he's in trouble at this point is because the ultra-nationalist version, or the ultra-Zionist right-wing camp, doesn't want to support him to be prime minister anymore, because Netanyahu won't make the ultra-Orthodox camp within Lugid or within the party structure of
I thought it was Likud.
his government. What?
I thought it was
Yeah,
Likud.
or Likud, excuse me.
Yeah.
I just pronounced it wrong. But yeah, basically the ultra-nationalists are like, no, the Orthodox have to serve in the military. And the Orthodox are like, no, we don't want to serve. But we want everything you're doing, but we don't want to serve.
Yeah.
So that's why his coalition is broken up. Otherwise, he would have a majority easy. It wouldn't even be close.
Yeah.
That's the only reason that he's had this trouble. And that's because
excuse me, we're the people you're doing this for. We didn't want to do any of the work.
So, man, I'm glad you're fucking Jewish, dude.
So am I.
Yeah, that's
Excuse me, I believe you wanted to send my son to go smash a Palestinian's face in, and that's fine. I'm okay with that. But does he have to put on the uniform? You guys work in the Sabbath. It's not good. I can't allow that.
yeah. I mean, basically,
that's the entire objection. They're the ultra orthodox within Israel are fucking monsters. Funny enough, also rampant with the same level of pedophilia the Catholics are. So if you want to know what kind of good people you're dealing with, yeah, they're shit. They're just shit.
Mm-hmm.
Spoonie loves them, but she's a big fan of them, you know. Actually, she probably has some gripe about them being ableist and sexist, which is true enough. But like, she also defines Judaism as them. So like, paradox. Uh-oh. How is that thing you like ableist?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, that just reminds me of Twin Peaks. That ableist thing you like is coming back in style soon. All right, go on.
No, I mean that's about
throw a pie.
That's actually about it in terms of what I have to say about that. Other than the fact that hand job camps are a psyop.
Yeah.
And they really are. I have a very short, like not even a paragraph, passage I want to read. This is an article on the Owl called "Life After Zionist Summer Camp," and this is about a woman who went to various hand job camps and her experience there. May
I just briefly define the concept of a hand job camp for the uninitiated?
Oh yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, so I want you again to imagine our fictional country of Rapan. Let's say basically that Rapanese billionaires were building these fucking summer camps for kids that are essentially supposed to be like, you're gonna learn the culture of Rapan, and you're gonna learn you get to interact with other people, so you know you're not alone, right? Which is a neutral purpose, we'll say, right? That would be a neutral purpose. But what in actuality happens is the goal is to worm into, especially young men, their minds that their sexuality is tied to the nation state of Rapan. And the purpose is to send your young females there to be used sexually. There's no better way to say that. I mean, this is really happening. Horrifyingly enough, it happens among the wealthy most often. I don't believe these are cheap places to go. Did they charge you guys?
But not much.
Really?
Because it's subsidized. Yeah.
Oh, it's okay. So it's subsidized by these fucking awful billionaires who are like, yeah, let's just prosecute 12-year-old girls.
It is subsidized, and you can get if you don't have enough money, you can get a scholarship. So it's
summer camp.
Yeah, you have to apply for a scholarship to it. I'm not joking. Joking.
You have to understand, Coffee Spoonie would not consider me a Jew. Right? I would be kicked out of the club until it became convenient to use my Jewishness as a tool, right? Which I'm sure she's not above. I'm not above it, so why would I expect her to be?
So I do just want to read two passages that are important toward this. Let's see.
I didn't get to go to hand job camp.
Because it's
I had to go to Lutheran hand job camp. It was way cheaper.
Because it's all Jews, I'm considered cute. The second summer, a boy, Avi, asks me out. To go where? Who knows? And I get my first kiss. Now, that is only important in the sense that you can read a bunch of these articles and you can even listen to the Cumtown bit about it. With Adam, a universal fact or a universal thing that is talked about is the fact that they go there and for the first time ever, they are actually considered attractive. And like they're in a context where like they can actually get somewhere as opposed to like their high school or whatever.
What?
So that's important. That is a almost universal experience at these places. But anyway, this is the actual thing that or this is the second end of it that is fucked up. Every so often, we pile into an empty cabin and are asked to stand under whichever sign taped to the wall best represents our idea of Zionism. Things like giving money to Israel, observing Jewish customs, moving to Israel are all posted. The older I get, the cooler it becomes to stand under moving to Israel sign. So I do. Our counselors tell us that they decide that they're going to spend a year in Israel after high school, and many of them say, I really want to move. Whatever the diaspora is, it does not sound good. Yeah, these places are like ideology factories. I went to one, full disclosure, when I was a kid, and I think
So many
also,
And when he went last year too, so many hand jobs. They really don't care. Awful people.
so the point of this, for the record, I only ever went once. A lot of people go every summer for like, until they're like an adult. Many people do. I didn't. I only went once. And 1 second. So the thing about it is that they have Israelis at these camps, and if you are somehow pro-Palestinian or really even say anything good about Palestinians, the odds are really stacked against you to ever, like, you're basically just arguing with everybody there.
You're not getting the hand jobs. You're not getting the
Oh,
hand jobs.
dang.
Well, and that's the reason in your mind when you're there, that's really like a big part of the reason that you're fucking there. And so here's the thing about it. I distinctly remember one kid who is there were very liberal Jews there and there were very conservative Jews there. And I distinctly remember an argument between an Orthodox kid and one of the liberal Jews. And they went at it. They went at it about racial justice, redlining, tax structures. Like, I mean, they went back and forth. They couldn't disagree more. That Orthodox kid was, of course, very conservative. That liberal kid went on to join AIPAC and be an official employee of AIPAC. So this ideology exists across the political spectrum. And I think it's dangerous to Jews everywhere, but also a reflection of the fact that our current politics has a very difficult time articulating anything different to this. And I think I think it's really bad.
Yeah. You know what's very comparable?
What?
We spent how many years talking about the Chinese, and they're doing all these horrible things. And what spiked up? What upticked?
Yeah.
And lo and behold, the same thing has repeated, because when you put the meme in somebody's head that these awful people are doing these awful things, somebody's going to act on it. Like, this is material. This is where the free speech warriors, this is another one of those times that the free speech warriors always have to run to the abstract, even though we have a mountain of evidence that's like certain things do actually contribute to violence, right? I firmly believe that. If you're not and this is a lot of people will talk out of both sides of the mouth on this issue. I'm going to be very frank, right? Because you'll hear the same people say shit like, "Oh, violent video games cause violence. Violent movies cause violence." Well, okay, if those are the things that cause violence, right? Can we regulate them? Well, no, you can't. You can't stop people from. Essentially, because of free speech, you can't stop people from creating a cultural atmosphere where violence is permissible, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we know all that about that in America, of course. If I were to trot everybody who's suffered violence as a result of that rhetoric, like the list I'd hit everybody but whites, right?
Which we've already discussed don't exist.
Yeah. Within the model, there's clearly people who are considered white, but again, we to get to whiteness, you have to accept some level of racist framing. It's unavoidable. Because to define whites, you have to define anti-whiteness, and you have to define non-whiteness, and you have to then make comparisons, and then individually, you're basically just looking at somebody and going, "Yeah, they're white." When it's all said and done, all the theory work doesn't mean shit. It's literally just, "Oh, they're pale." Okay, But
I prefer peach.
you prefer peach. Okay, I'll keep that in mind. The Chalkies is what I prefer. But yeah, it's pretty gruesome, and it's that's the problem I have with a lot of these arguments is that it's my bitch about defending capitalism. It's my bitch about defending the disingenuous notion of defending free speech, which I'm actually going to call steel manning capitalism again. Right? It's trying to steel man it because we're arguing entirely in the abstract. We have a body of evidence that knows how you should responsibly talk about these things, and not fucking happening. Like you can pretty much draw a line to where you can give somebody a fine for incitement, and it's pretty measurable. Free speech warriors can never ever argue beyond the abstract because they don't. It's because the facts are inconvenient ultimately. When you bring up facts, suddenly the theory falls apart and they don't know what to do, so they have to retreat back into abstraction further and further, right? You have to keep reifying these things, which is a fun theory I can get into briefly. But you have to keep forcing the actual fucking thing into the abstract to bury it, because otherwise, like we know, if you spend all your time saying China's taking over the world, China is fucking perpetrating these horrific crimes against the Uyghurs, China is the cause of the fucking COVID-19, which is why you can't go get barbecue fucking wings and get drunk with your friends no more. You're going to be primed to hate the Chinese. And if you only talk about Asia in the terms of the Chinese, lo and be fucking hold, every fucking Asian now has a problem. Every one of them. Doesn't even matter if they're fucking, the fucking subset of Asians, the AAPI, right? The actual, what we traditionally think of as Asian. Indians are all fucking eating shit over it. Unfairly,
So we were talking about reification, or you mentioned reification.
Yes, a couple of times.
Yeah, so I think the modern discussion of reification tends to be about music and art. However, to give a bit of background here, and we'll try to be brief. All of this starts.
Don't worry, I got this. So there's a guy, Varner, okay, and I wish I had his links. I'd fucking credit him for this. If we think about racism for a moment, racism is actually three different things that all are under the giant body of racist theory. There's systemic racism, which is what the U.S. backs globally, right? Violence in Yemen, violence in Israel, and so on. There's overt racism, which is when you see a Chinese person and you've been primed by the system to go beat the shit out of them, so you do it. Right? It doesn't matter what kind of Chinese they are, Japanese, Indian, whatever. They're Chinese, beat the shit out of them. Right? That's overt racism. And then there's implicit bias racism, where you think like, golly gee, we really like to help the black community, but they're just they're so poor, and it's because of their culture, right?
Yeah, if only they weren't so primed to being poor.
If they just weren't genetically inferior, they wouldn't be poor. It's sad, so we'll feed them, but it's just their fault. Nothing we have to do about it.
Yeah, nothing we can do about it, truly.
Truly. So, like, liberals tend to wash everything as racism, and then racists tend to go, everything's racist, huh? Which, you see that in anti-racism training. You see, like, some white woman will come in and be like, you're all racist, which she doesn't use the word in any way but just the word, right? She doesn't say you all have implicit biases, you all are overt racist, or you're all participating in a systemic racist system, which then, in terms of the fallacy at least, becomes a statement that is simultaneously false, true, and half true, right? Because some people are overtly racist. Some people have implicit bias. Fuck, we all have implicit biases, and some of them are going to take a negative racial connotation. And fucking, and then the system is overtly fucking racist, and we're all participating in the system, even the people who are the victims, right? So simultaneously, you have three. The fucking thing is meaningless, actually, which is how the conservatives keep the fucking racism going, because you can't fix the system, because you can't work on people's implicit biases, because there's overt racism. And if you just say racism and you don't talk about which one you're actually talking about, you don't clarify this type of racism is called X,
And then all you do is make the racists angry.
then all you do is make the racists angry, so they go do a racism, then you call that racist, and then they go, oh, everything's racist now. I said the N-word at fucking Denny's, and suddenly I'm a racist. I called the Chinese boy a kike, and now I'm a racist. Oh, I should have censored that. Sorry. I can say it, but you guys don't. John, you can too if you want. You know, this is how that works. It's called a reification fallacy, right? What it implies you're doing functionally is, if you take a subject, right, the Chinese person, and let's say this Chinese person is actually a billionaire and actually participating with the Chinese Communist Party, and they are engaging in some sort of espionage. It's not out of reach. You take an American, right? You take an American billionaire. They're engaging on espionage on behalf of the American government. This is a normal thing. Rich people are in cohorts with the intelligence communities. That's true. That's objectively true. And it doesn't matter which intelligence community, that's how they operate, because they need money to operate. As it turns out, voyeurism does not pay very well, right? So they have to have this parasitic relationship between the two. Then you say, well, the Chinese are spying on us, or the Chinese would say the Americans are spying on us. We move away from, we move to reify them, right? We now abstracted this particular billionaire to some sort of category, right? In this case, it's a racial designation or a nationality designation. And then we make a claim, a normative claim about all of them. Well, they all fucking spy on us, which isn't true. In my heart of hearts, the nice Chinese man who actually runs the local Chinese restaurant is not a spy. But plenty of people will make the claim. I know, he's just a nice guy.
Mr. Jong Kim isn't a spy?
Mr. Kim Jong-un. But we all do this when we talk about North Korea, when we talk about America, when Americans are talked about internationally. All these things fucking happen because how we conceive of them, right? We objectify them. So we now have an active subject, right? The actual spy, the American or Chinese spy, and then we have the abstract objectification of the American or the Chinese. And these are universally applied. And then what's the argument? Well, not all Chinese people do that. This particular person did, but not all of them do. Well, that's the exact problem, right? This one did, so now we're applying it to all of them because we're talking about the Chinese government. And we tend to conflate the passive existence of the machinery of government, the system, with the actual nation-state peoples. This is the reification problem more often, but that's how it's done.
So the context that I've heard it in might be also more, how do I put it, might be better understood as cementification. And basically the way that I've heard about it is in the context of music. And generally it's used to describe when an expression is
when Discord makes it sound like you have a wicked stutter.
Yeah, sorry. Basically, when an expressive piece, usually music, sometimes art, is associated with a commodity in the sort of context of capitalism generally. When an expressive piece is associated with a commodity, the commodity freezes it in place and ties your association of that expression to a particular commodity. So the example that we used in group chat is
Robo-Rooter.
a particular company which we don't endorse or We're not ripping on in any capacity. It was just fun to make fun, make a plumbing joke.
Yeah,
So
it's an homage to Futurama. Call Robo Rooter if you flushed a towel, and we can also help with your impacted bowel. Yeah,
so I didn't know that's what that was a reference to.
yeah, it's
But
a fucking great joke.
The idea is like, what if that was to the tune of like Ode to Joy? And then for the rest of your life, you would only ever associate Ode to Joy with fucking poop, literal poop,
Well,
right?
hey, to be fair, it would be the people who unclog your poop.
I guess so.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's fair.
It wouldn't even be that. It would be an association with the company, which is the passive object, the thing that the legal fiction that
Mm.
sends out human beings, the real social relationship, to clean your poop.
To the tune of Ode to Joy.
To the tune of Ode to Joy. Yeah, it's the same thing. The situation is like if you think of Reese's, what do you think of? Just right now, you three, what do you think of? If I say Reese's cups, what do you think of? Or excuse me, Reese's. I don't want to prime you too much. What do you think of when I say Nestle?
Oh,
That bunny.
crunch.
The bunny. How about you, Maeillory?
I think of the bunny too.
Okay, so you think of the bunny, this passive object, right? This fiction. But what is Nestle better represented as? It's a series. It is a social construction where hundreds of people work in it and perform labor, and the capitalist class at the top of it fucking extracts wealth from their labor production through the market. Right? That's what Nestle actually is. It is an organization, a hierarchical organization of people where at the top they are extracting surplus value from the bottom. And those people at the bottom are paid a wage, and for that wage they fucking produce products under the brand of Nestle. Right? That's what Nestle actually is. But when we talk about Nestle, two of you thought of the bunny. That's reification. It is the erosion of social links in these endeavors and turning it is turning a passive object into an active thing, and it is turning a social construction into a passive thing that you just ignore and write off. It's the basis for the commodity fetish, and the art construction of it is essentially the same thing.
Yeah, I was gonna say, when you mentioned Nestle, the other thing I thought of were like something a little bit more abstract than that, which like are water rights, because I think they were involved in like that case where basically they settled the fact that water is not a guaranteed right under the Constitution or something like that. So
yeah.
But I had to like go out of my way to fucking read about that, obviously. And it is possible through great effort for a business to become so toxic and its brand to become so toxic through a lot of effort. I mean, it really does take a lot of people recognizing it. For them to, of course, what do? They fucking drop the brand and they reorganize as a different company, and then that's it. The best example of this is Monsanto. Eventually their brand became so toxic that they couldn't fucking change whatever the fucking leaf logo is enough times. They're like, all right, we're going to split up into like two companies that are owned by the same corporation, but we're going to split up into two companies and we'll no longer be Monsanto in any recognizable way. And we'll like move some assets around or whatever. But that way people will stop fucking yelling at us because of Roundup.
We're now Monsanto.
No, we're Monsanta. We're feminists now.
Yeah, there you go.
Just add a little feminine touch.
Girls can do it too. We can fucking give people cancer. Yeah.
Yeah,
girl power.
Girl boss. Fucking yeah. It's run by dudes.
Well, that's obviously the irony of most of these girl boss things.
Yeah. Well,
No, it's sort of like, honestly, Monsanto, like any like company like Monsanto or fucking defense contractors or whatever rebranding that way when they're like, yeah, we support diversity or whatever, is like all those pictures of fucking people wearing blacks for Trump shirts and they're white. Like,
yeah.
how many of those fucking people wear that shirt?
I don't think you understand what you wrote on that T-shirt. I don't think you do. But yeah, no, reification's kind of a cool thing because it's actually an extremely easy to grasp concept. It's just like it seems really hard to grasp at first. It's like when again, when you think of America, what you're actually thinking of is the fucking American government, which is a systemic is a fucking massive system of things made up of a very tiny fraction of the American populace. Or you think of this amorphous fucking blob that is like this 800-pound fucking overeating rude gorilla that, which represents like, I don't know, a tenth of the populace. Or you think of this,
the
what-
John problem.
yeah, when you have to fucking reconstruct it, like when you, or excuse me, when you actually break it down, what you're talking about is a multifaceted thing, because in a liberal democracy, you're supposed to be this multifaceted, openly competitive thing, and it's made up of actually a lot of fucking people, and it's kind of honestly, it's kind of a liberal theory has a lot of contradictions. This is where I find there to be one massive fucking contradiction, right? Because if everybody's a fucking monad, you are in a war of all against all. You're in a competition in a political sense, because you have to be fucking gaining over other people. And if you have like-minded interests, you can band together, sure, like the Medicare for All crowd, the make sure that the Jews are stuck in Israel crowd, so on, right? There's all these factions, but they're all made up of these little tiny individual monads. So when you talk about the amorphous concept of the right, even, what are you actually describing? And everybody's guilty of reification errors. There's almost no way to avoid them because of the way our language is actually set up. We need to be able to be very quickly communicate fucking concepts, and it's easier to shorthand them. It is actually easier to reify them and objectify them if they're complex social arrangements, and obliterate those social links. So when you talk about the Trump voter, right? This was the obsession of liberals for a long time, the psyche of the Trump voter. If you're a liberal, that's already, like, the contradictions in your fucking brainwaves are already massive, right? Because you believe everybody's a fucking monad and everybody's competing in a war of all against all, and this happens to be one faction. But even within that faction, there's a fuck ton of monads. One of the biggest splits was the anti-Jew versus pro-Jew, right? That was part of MAGA. That was a big fight within MAGA, and to be frank, when they were trying to sort out what is their movement. Do we like Jews or not? Do we allow some Jews in and gatekeep on the rest? Obviously the left ones. Or do we fucking no Jews because they're the fucking enemy, right? That alone. What do we do about Muslims? Do you let Muslims in or not? Do you let fucking Latinos in or not? Like, it was a multifaceted coalition of these fucking awful bigots, with each one with their own fucking crank form of bigotry. Because that's what America encourages. It doesn't encourage collectivism. It encourages monadism. So these people were very fragmented. Trying to figure out what the psychology of a Trump voter was is fucking ridiculous. You're talking about an abstract thing. You're not talking about a fucking actual individual voter. And that's why they did all those interviews, and they'd be surprised at what they said.
And you believe they said this?
Who?
The Trump.
Oh, yes.
The Trump voter. The hypothetical Trump voter.
Yeah, that's the kind of shit they would do. So you'd have it in your head that all Trump voters were, what was the popular meme? They all regret voting for Trump. More people voted for Trump than the last time. So,
Right.
Not really. Some of them doubled the fuck down. A good chunk of them doubled the fuck down. Shit, there were a good chunk of people who voted Hillary and then Trump. You know what I'm saying? Like, the Trump voter is just a fucking monad. They're making haphazard decisions. It's specifically because liberal ideology does not encourage collective fucking thought. Yeah. Liberalism's a fucking poison. I'm not talking about Democrats. I am the fucking overall thing of liberalism. John Locke is a fucking demon, and so is John Stuart Mill. Piece of shit. Absolute piece of shit. Fuck him. I hate Locke.
So the other thing I was going to mention is that
okay, don't know what to do with that. Moving on.
Yeah. The final thing I was going to mention just is that just to really get into the most base of left-wing theory here, and when I say left, I don't mean liberal theory, and I don't mean Democrats and like that notion of left wing thought. I'm talking about like the juicy stuff that we like to talk about on this podcast. I'm going to talk about, or I think it's worth describing labor theory of value just for a second, because the way it links up with reification is that the idea of reification, to my understanding, also originated with the idea that the industrial production and the repeated, essentially, cementification of our profit, like owner worker dynamic would be reified, or was reified, as in it was impossible to eventually imagine anything different because that's all you know. And this sort of fits in with a saying that goes around a lot, which is that it's easier to imagine the end of the world than it is to imagine the end of capitalism. And I think that's part of the sort of the obsession with apocalyptic media in the first place, is that, and also sci-fi, which is that in all of those instances, there really isn't much of an imagination toward what a society would look like outside of a market context, outside of a context where people own things and workers work with the things that are owned by somebody else. But would you?
Oh, go ahead. No.
No, I was just going to say, this leads into the most base of theories, which is labor theory of value. And good.
In a roundabout way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
they're linked, and they're further down the line than the original thought of labor theory of value, which basically was with Marx. Reification as a thought process didn't come about until like the 1900s. I don't think.
This shit's older. Okay, so prior to Marx, there were labor theories of value. That term is Marx. What you want to say is Marx's labor theory of value. I'm sorry to be pedantic, but if you're talking about Marx's labor theory of value, that comes after his theory of reification, which the notions of reification were built into capitalism. And I'm not entirely certain on the history. I am Socratic, right? I find a question, I answer a question, then I go to the next one or figure out what questions I have from that. So you have to bear with me here. But what you're talking about in terms of the labor theory of value, it's very old. It's a very old theory. It's the fundamental crux of capitalism. There's a reason they call them neoclassical economics, and they worry entirely about the supply and demand lines, and they don't fucking call themselves classic capitalists. It's because they want to disassociate capitalism from the labor theory of value, which is like I believe Ricardo. And Adam Smith had his own labor theory of value, and then those were extrapolated upon by Marx to make what the accepted theory is, which endures a lot better than those earlier ones. The labor theory does break down in some abstract instances, and it clearly doesn't cover rent. It can't cover rent. Rent's a different thing. The rent theory is also older. So out of the labor theory of value, right, which actually is not the first theory Marx comes with. Marx actually talks about reification earlier. And it's from reification he figures out the labor theory of value, and he figures out the commodity fetish. So the relationship is more akin to this. If you're in an industrial factory and you're fucking making shit, you're going to sell it. It's going to be sold under a brand. The owner at the time, most likely, you're making fucking, I don't know, fucking cocaine laced, what do they call those? Fucking not potions. Help me out here. The fucking snake oil cures. What were they fucking called?
Oh, what were they called? I don't. Elixirs.
Yeah, fucking elixirs and shit like that, right? So you're working at this factory where basically you're fucking assembling elixirs. You're fucking taking a glass bottle, somebody's fucking shaking it around, and then they're fucking pouring it, and you're fucking bottling it, and you're putting it out there so somebody else can ship it, and they can sell this fucking snake oil, right? This cocaine-laced snake oil. The abstraction happens right there. Because not what people are going to see in the olden days, if you went to the blacksmith and you needed fucking horseshoes, or you wanted a fucking elixir to, I don't know, make your dick work or some dumb shit, you would have to go to the fucking person who makes it, and you'd watch them make it, and you'd be talking with them the entire time, and they'd fucking hand you the shit. Doesn't matter how long it takes, 5 minutes, 2 hours, doesn't matter. That was your day. That's what you did. You had a social relationship with the person who actually made the thing. Alienation comes into play, because now the labor is alienated from the product it is sent out. The worker is alienated from the labor he has done. The reification occurs then because everybody puts their fucking thought power into the fucking brand and into the bottle.
And just at an even more base level, the most basic way to understand it is that at least this is, I mean, this is a less complicated version of it at the very least, is if you take a pile of sticks and you tie them together to make a ladder, the thing that made that ladder more valuable than the pile of sticks is the fact that you worked on it and put work into it. And that is solely different from the idea of value being created in a marketplace where it sort of fluctuates back and forth. The idea is that the value rests with the fact that you worked on it and you made the thing more valuable, and that is different than sort of a fluctuating sort of assigned value that happens when somebody says, I think it's worth that much, I'm going to give you that much for it. That's not the thing that makes it valuable. What makes it valuable is the work that was put into it.
Yeah, that's what makes everything fucking valuable. Again, that's not related to rent. Yeah, because the labor theory of value says, in short, because I'm gonna be dogmatic but incorrect in my language, so fucking purist, I don't know, suck a dick. You're close. Yeah. So basically, if we were to look at the process, and I'll use Richard Wolff's example of chairs, right?
Mm-hmm.
The chairs come into the store. How did they get there? They got there because somebody shipped them to the store. How did they get in the truck? Because somebody loaded them into the truck. How did they get to the loading bay? Somebody loaded them into boxes and took them to the loading bay. How did they get there? They went through an extensive process with multiple people touching it where they fucking put chairs together. And how we measure the value then, in neoclassical economics, you measure it on price. What did it cost? But already we have a fallacy, because if I walk out in the woods and I look at a tree, I just look at a tree, what does that tell me about the price?
If you're someone who regularly converts those trees into usable lumber, probably something.
What though? What does it tell you? It tells you nothing. Trees don't come with a fucking price tag. It's just a tree. When you cut down the tree, suddenly you know how much labor time it took to fucking make that tree into usable fucking lumber. Because
Sure, but you're just treating labor time as the capital there. Like you can
bingo.
also walk out if you're someone who knows that lumber and you're someone who turns that lumber into fucking usable fucking material, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can go out, look at a tree, and determine that one tree is going to utilize more labor hours to convert it into X number of lumber.
Actually, you can't. What you can is what you expect it to do, because you have a measurement of the amount of labor time it will take to convert that into a usable item.
No, you don't even have to make it that complicated.
It's not complicated.
No, Cenk, what you're describing is mapping. You're describing mapping, which, yes, is a valuable, I might be biased here, but is a valuable thing to spend your time doing. So that's the labor that you're doing at that point.
Yeah.
So that is work. So
it's work. Yes.
Like and that helps create the value. The tree didn't have it. You assigned it at that point. You did the work to fucking make the thing happen.
Here, I'll demonstrate it. It's arbitrary. Cenk, how much? Just looking at you, how much is your work worth?
On average?
Just looking at you. Just by looking at you. No other relevant data other than looking at you. How much is it worth?
I don't know.
Exactly. Thank you. Moving on.
However much I can find someone to pay me.
Bingo, because price is arbitrary. Price is an arbitrary metric. Really?
Got his ass.
Thank you. Yeah. So how you determine it?
Price is functionally an arbitrary metric in the same way that, like, I mean, we live in a market. Obviously, I'm arguing from the position of an interest in the market. Like, big fucking shocker.
Here's the rules, though. I cannot use any hyperbole, and you have to argue from material fact. So materially, looking in the mirror, What is your price?
Pretty fucking cheap most days. Materially,
But how are
there
you
is
determining that?
fluctuations. No.
You
Materially,
gotta
there.
work. You got some working kidneys.
Yeah.
What is your price? The answer is arbitrary, because when I say what is your price, what currency am I even talking about?
I mean, the material value is going to
What-
also be dependent upon other things. It's
Don't
going to be dependent
think
upon the
too hard
market
about
around
this.
it.
If I just say price, what fucking currency am I
Yes,
talking
if you
about?
oversimplify it, yeah, absolutely, it will become
that's right.
overly simple.
That's correct, because it is that simple.
Congratulations.
That's because it is that simple. How we determine your price is once we've agreed upon a social currency to exchange value. Okay? Once we've
How
done
valuable is a balloon of oxygen?
that, I don't know. What currency are you measuring it in?
Yeah,
How
sure.
much
How
labor time
valuable
did
is a
it take
balloon
to
of
put it in?
oxygen? It becomes a lot more
How
fucking
much labor
valuable
time
whenever
did
you're
it take to put the
underwater and you
balloon
need
in?
a fucking breath of air.
That actually doesn't really determine anything.
It
That's
does for the person who's underwater.
That's arbitrary, though. That's really fucking arbitrary. Unfortunately, don't take the position that it means it's trivial. What I mean by arbitrary is it is arrived at through a non-fucking measurement. You're acting upon an emotional value that has nothing to do with something fucking material. That's the problem here. What Marx set out to do in the labor theory of value was measure things by material things. The material way to do that is to look at how much time it takes a human to perform any specific task, measure it, and determine what that would fucking do. If you look in a factory, there's a reason that somebody is not just assembling chairs by themselves and you have 5 people assembling chairs. There's a reason that somebody planes the wood, somebody fucking stains the wood, somebody fucking puts it together, and then somebody else puts it in a fucking box, and then somebody else takes that fucking box and loads it up in a truck. It's because that's the most brutally efficient way to do it. But in doing so, you don't actually make chairs. Technically speaking, you plane wood. Technically speaking, you stain wood. Your labor is abstracted even from the fucking commodity you're making. Now, the measurement of the price is once again, it's a function of what fucking currency it is, and I'm not even going to list them all, but in part, what currency you're agreeing to be paid in, or what currency society pays people in, or what currency the fucking guy has on hand. It's a determination of how much did it fucking cost them to fucking buy all that fucking wood? How much did it fucking buy them to run the building for the day? The lights, the fucking, if there's fucking individual fuels for each thing, how much did the fuel cost them, etc. But then we reach a problem.
I've always been of the opinion that currency values is totally fucking meaningless. It's all a representation of how much, people generally deal with,
Then
right?
there's hope
No
for
one
you.
no one gives a shit if something costs $100 whenever, they care about how things cost in relation to other things.
Right. There you go. See, actually, you do understand part of it.
Yeah,
Because-
obviously I do. I understand how markets work. I get it.
Yes, that's part of the labor theory of value then. So you have this abstraction of cost. Now, the other part of it is this. How does the actual capitalist make profit? So they measure. Cenk makes 10 chairs an hour. John only makes 2 chairs an hour. So together they make 12 chairs, right?
Sure, but I can sell John's chairs for twice as much money because someone will pay me twice as much for them.
The problem is that each of John's chairs are more expensive than your chairs. You made 10, he made 2. He costs way fucking more. Because if I need to sell 4 chairs, I'm in the whole 2 chairs on John, and I'm up fucking, I'm still up 8 on you. Right? So what we then make is a determination of how much fucking social labor ought to go into a thing. And you know what that is. Those are those fucking efficiency measurements.
Yeah, I mean, it also becomes hard to measure other things, little things like fucking how do you measure the value of an engineer as you're looking at fucking, mapping all of this fucking bullshit throughout the entire world.
What type of engineer are you talking about? Are you talking about somebody who builds a fucking thing, or are you talking about somebody who sits and does blueprinting? And that's not pedantic. That's actually really important.
I mean, either or, honestly, but
they're apples and oranges, my friend. What you're doing is a reification error. You're looking at a thing, an abstract concept of an engineer, and you're not fucking breaking it down into the separation. And it's actually a very critical separation. I agree with you on that.
Sure.
A fucking engineer who works in an entirely theoretical department like R&D, you're coming up with an entirely arbitrary price because they don't really labor in any kind of traditional sense. How much they cost is arbitrary. Their work is kind of worthless. But somebody who actually goes out and fucking builds a fucking bridge, their work is worth something, and you can measure that in the time they spend building the fucking bridge, whatever contribution they make to it. Even if it is just the fucking layout, so they can start fucking purchasing orders because they have produced the commodity. You're functionally selling the boss then the blueprint. If you're working in R&D, my friend, your labor is actually kind of fucking worthless. It's kind of a neat contradiction built into capitalism. And this is where you can then abstract to figure out that, like, oh yeah, if I can just fucking rent a movie digitally off a server, the movie really isn't worth anything at that point because I can keep replicating the fucking labor that was done until the labor is at a near zero value. It'll never actually reach zero, obviously, but the fucking value gets small. Well, this got weird.
It just
There we
it
go.
feels like we're nitpicking over something that's inane again.
It's critically important.
Can anyone please tell me about Jimi Hendrix guitar?
Fuck off. Fuck right the hell off.
We'll do that again someday.
Actually, if you want to be very particular about it, right? Jimi Hendrix, through the act of playing a fucking guitar, has modified that guitar in a very certain way. It sounds a certain way, right, John? This is your argument?
Yes.
Jimi Hendrix did not produce a commodity, but he did put labor into a thing that made it a unique thing. When you go to sell that, how much is it worth? What's the price on it? And we can come up with a price number. I can probably Google it. But did we arrive at it through something measurable, or do we arrive at it through a very arbitrary process?
Yeah, it's definitely arbitrary.
It's super
sure
arbitrary.
Yeah. It fluctuates depending on if there's a new documentary out about him or if there's news about his estate. I mean, any number of reasons. And that's all emotional. No, I'm not joking. That really is all emotional. It's true.
I agree.
The point of the demonstration is that price is not an inherent quality. Price is an abstract fucking notion to be able to facilitate exchange. It is in and of itself a machine. That's what price is. That's what we arrive at. Value is judged differently because there's oh fuck. Now you know I'm tired. There's the value created by the act of creating the commodity. There's a certain monetary value associated with it that we call price that you can then exchange values for.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like the main thing about labor theory of value that like it clashes up against, and the reason that the Jimi Hendrix guitar drives you nuts is, and I'm not saying that labor theory of value is wrong. I'm just saying it's a thing that's hard to resolve because it is arbitrary on some level. Is craftsmanship.
The labor that has nothing to do. What are you talking about? What drives me nuts about it is like I can't get away from this fucking thing. That somehow the labor theory of value is disproved because Jimi Hendrix played guitar is functionally what I get.
No, I don't think it's disproved. I don't think it's disproved. I just because the thing about it is like you're talking about like labor theory of value has to do with like meeting industrial capacity needs and like making sure that like society has the things that it needs, people aren't exploited, etc. Artisans under such a system, I imagine, would be fairly unique, but also they wouldn't be alienated from their labor because they'd have a lot of the stuff that they need provided for them in a way that makes it so that they're pursuing the things that they want to pursue. The thing I'm just saying,
kind of, I get the problem with the artisan in liberal democratic capitalism is while their production is more organic and they're not alienated at that step. What if they're a fucking artisan who produces for somebody else, like an artist? Think of a TV show. How many people actually produce for that TV show? They're all independent contractors. Under the law, they are functionally artisans.
I mean, we're 3 artisans producing for you right now.
Yeah. Well, you're producing for the whole group. Thank you. We are we are a cooperative. Unfortunately, we have to use the artisanal model. But yeah, our podcast is an artisanal model production. It's a very small number of people who produce this thing. It's not. It is not a traditional capitalist endeavor. But where we become abstracted from it.
I mean, how do you determine that it's traditional or not?
Do we look like Amazon?
Is Amazon the traditional capitalist model?
Actually, yeah. It's a big fucking corporation that it operates under a brand. It alleviates all those fucking things. It extracts people's labor for surplus value for the benefit of a very few minority of people.
I'd argue that
We all
big
get.
corporation is a fairly modern invention.
It's not really. They had them as
I mean,
the first attempts at them were in
did they
1300.
have them in the 1800s,
Yes.
1600s,
Yeah.
1500s?
I just said when. If we're gonna play the Sorites paradox, walking
Listen,
upright.
you've been doing this all night with me. What?
Yeah,
Like,
unfortunately,
I'm allowed
I
to play
have
it with
not.
you.
Unfortunately, I have not. When you're like, if you were to say if you were to say every fucking object in space is the same, and then you're like, you're playing the Sorites paradox with me. There's clearly a difference between asteroids and fucking spaceships. Okay, when you say engineers, you're talking about an amorphous concept, and you're like, you can't fucking tear that apart. Except there are civil engineers who actually perform labor, and then there's theoretical engineers who do other shit that really don't labor. They don't. So
And the twain never mix,
yeah,
ever.
they may mix. You can fucking change the mode of production that you're engaged in, whether or not you're producing some sort of fucking research versus producing something else.
And
But
at some point, if that research produces an actual physical product, does it flip over? Do you become valuable then?
if it produces a product, you have labored in the classical sense.
Okay. So while you're determining what you're producing, fuck you. But after you've produced the thing you've determined that you're producing, you're good.
Yeah, because there's no measurement on research. There's no labor involved in research. You're basically fucking reading and you're tinkering around, right? If you want to,
Fundamentally disagree on whether or not there's labor in research.
there's not labor, there's work. Again, there's a distinction. Work is done whenever somebody does something inside the Okay, so I know what you're gonna bitch. I know what your bitch is gonna be. This is really fucking pedantic, but it's actually, again, under the labor theory of value, this is an extremely important concept because we need to be able to think of these things differently. If you were to look at your job and you were to look at my job, we don't actually labor, we work. Somebody who works in a factory and through the process of commodity production crystallizes their labor into a physical thing has produced a commodity, ergo they have labored. We work, they labor. That's a very important distinction. If you're an engineer and you're doing something purely theoretical, you are engaged in work. I did not disagree with that. You are not engaged in labor until you've actually reached the point where you can produce a thing to be put onto the market. Now, if I give you anything here, you can say that's kind of pedantic. And in this particular one instance, it may be kind of pedantic. Because ultimately, when you're talking about the working class, there's a reason they're not called the labor class. And in England, they are called the Labour Party, right? Those words were picked for
an
a very
actual
particular
labor
reason.
party. Yeah, gotcha.
Well, that's because originally labor was supposed to specifically apply to people who worked in factories, heavy mining, things where you produced commodities. That was what that party was for. That's the thing it does. We tend to call it, though, the working class because we want to include people who do not engage in commodity production yet are still exploited in a wage relationship, which would include like housekeepers, unpaid domestic work, nursing staff. Nurses don't produce commodities, but they work very, very, very hard. So we don't use labor, which is an exclusionary term speaking only about commodity production versus the term work. So it has.
Yeah. Oh yeah. What about hot tub streamers? Do they work?
Yeah.
Sorry, people have been going on about this lately, so I just wanted to fucking interject.
What the fuck is a hot tub?
Yeah, you've been monologuing for too long.
Fair enough.
Well,
if you're gonna mischaracterize the labor theory of value, and there's an ardent communist in the room, we do have to get pedantic and very particular.
Well, I just want to close on this topic because I think that it's a dumb, neckbeard topic that fucking the quartering or MTG headquarters is mad about, along with everybody else.
Oh God, this asshole.
So, all right, here it is. Basically, there was a trend of Twitch streamers who would like do the just chatting thing from a hot tub. and just chatting is a very popular like category on Twitch. It's just basically everything that isn't literally playing a game for the most part.
For those of you watching us on Twitch right now, that's
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
That's-
So
You loving my
basically,
titties?
you know, people got very mad because there were a bunch of streamers who did the just chatting thing, but they were like in a swimsuit in a hot tub. And Twitch was like back and forth on if they were going to ban people who did that or if they were going to allow it to happen. And they've had very weird guidelines in the past about like what constitutes sexual content, and it's all very stupid because you know a lot of the gaming streamers somehow think they're like directly in competition with people who do that sort of streaming, even though they're not. Just because they're on the same fucking website, like no. So basically, Twitch now has added a category separate from just chatting called hot tub streams or something like that. So my question to Dan is, are hot tub streamers laboring?
No, they're not laboring. They're working.
Yeah. There is a difference, of course. They're not doing industrial production.
You would not say somebody who's performing in a band is laboring. You would say they're working.
Okay. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
This is interesting though. If you look at a concert performance, you have a wonderful mix of labor and work.
Mhm.
Because you have okay, at the front office where they sell the tickets, like let's go back to the 70s for this example, right? Where they sell the fucking tickets, right? Those
Mhm.
people are selling a commodity, right? In this case, they're selling the ticket. The ticket is the commodity. The people who made the ticket did fucking commodity production, and it entitles you to a certain thing with this commodity, right? If you buy band merch, if you buy the band merch, there's an awful lot of commodity extraction. There's a lot of commodity exchange going on. Pardon me. Again, I am a little tired. We do need to quit soon.
Mm.
If you look at the band itself, right, the thing that the commodity got you in the door for, which the commodity, funny enough, the ticket then becomes almost a type of fucking almost a type of currency in and of itself, right? Because it entitled you to do this thing. You're exchanging monetary value for another type of money that buys you a third thing, which is the fucking performance, right? And the atmosphere of the fucking band performance. The band itself and the people who are setting that up on stage, since that's not a commodity in the very strict sense, they are engaged in work. Commodities, in fact, the people selling the band merch, right? That's a great example of it because they don't actually labor, they work. Unless you can fucking see them making the fucking merchandise right there and the fucking person selling it to you. But even then, they shift from laboring to working.
Seamlessly almost.
Almost seamlessly. Yeah, literally the minute they're done fucking sewing the commodity, the moment they walk up to the fucking register to sell you that shirt, that split right there is the difference between labor and work. Made a commodity, sold a commodity. The short form of it. Work happens around that superfluous shit. Another good example is salesmen don't add value. Laborers add value.
So the act of selling is work.
The act of selling is work, yes.
But it's not labor.
It's not labor because they don't make the commodities, they sell the commodities. Every salesman is a detriment to the fucking commodity. The act of selling the commodity. It's paradoxical. It's funnily, it's built right into the system. What I do all day in a call center is work. I do not at all produce commodities. Mind you, in no way, shape, or form am I anywhere near the idea of producing a commodity. All I do is work.
What's somebody who makes maps?
It depends what you do with a map, isn't it?
Well, if I'm not making the physical map, but I'm collecting points in the field,
You're
am
working.
I doing work? I'm working. Yeah.
You're working. Yeah, that's not labor. Unless the assemblage of that data.
Okay, let's just stop nitpicking this and let's wrap this up very nicely for the audience. So the value in creating this pedantic,
it's not pedantic,
point digging So what is
Oh,
the
this is
value
work.
for you, the
This
listener?
has to be work.
Yeah, yeah,
What we're
yeah.
doing right now is work. Yes.
What we're doing right now is work. It's a lot of work. It's so to the audience at large and to Cenk more specifically,
Uh-huh.
why are we making a point of splitting these two terms so specifically?
Okay. All right. So when you're trying to understand the wider body of capitalism, you have to understand how commodities are exchanged, how value is exchanged, and how things are considered value. Which, if you look at what I put in the chat, I had to go fucking dig this out because I'm fucking tired. But it's a use value versus an exchange value. Those are two different, very different things, right? The use value of a fork is different than the exchange value of a fork. And this is represented through price, right? Tended to be the fucking exchange value is the price. The reason you're making a distinction is so that you understand in terms of labor versus work. You need to understand what is, if you will, what actually drives price up versus drives price down. Now, this is not all of them, but this is what you'll understand the most readily. So, if I have a corporation like Amazon, right? What Amazon's actually really bad for this. Let me pick one that actually produces something. Okay. The
The
tear
widget
gas.
factory.
The tear gas factory here in fucking Pennsylvania, right? Right up the road, right?
Okay.
They produce
Mhm.
commodified tear gas.
Mhm.
What drives the cost of tear gas down is, and we're going to get into an abstraction here, efficiency as defined by product produced versus labor time. What drives it down is more gas canisters being produced in either a shorter number of hours or the exact same number of hours. That's what drives price down. Okay? As long as you're, and this is going beyond the labor
That is
theory, by the way.
something that will drive price down.
Right, that drives price down. The problem is, what about the fucking foreman, right? The foreman draws a wage in the form generally of a salary, but wage
Sure.
for this purpose. What value does he add to that fucking commodity? Does he make more? No. Does he fucking really, that's it. Does he make any of the cans himself? Probably not. Right, or at least not often enough that it's relevant. Maybe somebody calls off sick and he has to jump on the line for a time, or somebody gets hurt and he has to jump on the line, right? So there's an efficiency deficit. It's his job to step in and fill the efficiency deficit. But ultimately, he doesn't fucking do that day to day. Most day to day things he does is fucking scream at workers, fucking argue with workers, try to deny them sick time. His purpose is damage control, if you will. What they do is they try to mitigate other costs to justify the cost of themselves. The very existence of the foreman drives the price up, right? I probably should say shop supervisor or some dumb shit, but whatever.
Sure.
Above him is something like a human resources agent, right? He has to answer to human resources if he fucks up or he's called into question. A human resource agent does not fucking jump on the line and fucking produce gas canisters. The human resource agent just fucking processes paperwork. What do they do again? What their job is damage mitigation, cost mitigation. So they're trying to keep costs down while themselves being an extra cost that makes it go up. The safety supervisor, he or she certainly does not jump on that line and produce fucking gas canisters. They drive costs up. The fucking person above them, right? Person above them in the chain. We'll say, for the
Yep.
sake of argument, vice president. The vice president, all they do is fucking yell at people all day. They yell at that fucking class of managers because they themselves are just the higher class managers. They yell at them. They drive costs up. Above that,
Those are all things that do drive costs up. Yes.
the very existence of them drive costs up. So to combat that, they have to figure out ways to drive costs down. This is why they are fundamentally opposed to the labor class, right? They perform work. They certainly are working under the brand of an institution for the goals of that institution, and that institution is represented, generally speaking, by a shareholder and a fucking command structure: CEO, CFO, COO, CTO, etc.
Mhm.
They all have to answer to those group of people who fucking are themselves a huge driver in individual cost. but they get to make all the fucking decisions, right? So they perform work, they get to make the decisions. There's the distinction is that the people who actually make the money of the company, who bring revenue in, the fucking bottom, are in an antagonistic relationship with the people who do work at the top. So the distinction, one of the important distinctions in the labor theory of value is why are you trying to determine work versus labor? It's important because you need to understand the class antagonism. You need to understand why these people who drive costs way, way up by their very existence exist. And they exist because they are there to discipline and control the working class, which is on the bottom of that relationship. The people who actually produce the money. The surplus value, if I want to be technical, above and beyond what they would need to just live through the day. However many gas canisters that would be, I don't actually know, right? I don't know what their expenses are individually. But in theory, if they got to the point where they had paid for themselves for the day, all their costs to get to work, and that's everything from family, food, clothing, fuel, the fucking car, etc., their bills, their power, etc., their costs. If they've paid for that for the day, they could just fucking stop. And if they wanted to make more above that, they would get to keep that surplus value for themselves and determine, do we fucking add more lines and add more workers to produce more gas canisters or not? But they don't get to make those decisions because they are the laborers, they are the working class. They are the class that is dedicated to producing surplus value through commodities. Workers above them on the chain are there to fucking keep them in line and keep stealing that surplus value. But you can't get that far without first understanding how fucking value occurs in capitalism, and that's through labor. So these things build up, if you will. You have to have the base before you get to the top.
Why are these canister laborers alienating the labor of line production laborers who produce lines to produce canisters?
They're not. The
They
people
feel
who
like they are.
They're not. If you have somebody who's producing the
Not-
fucking machinery to produce the fucking thing, the machinery in a company is called capital, right? That's part of your fucking capital. That's what you use. That's your means of production. That's the capital. But at some point, it itself had to be a commodity unless you made it yourself. So the people who make those parts are in a different company. Those people on the bottom who actually make those parts and machine them out and fucking shape them and so on and assemble that shit and ship it out, those are the labor in that. They're not.
So could we determine like maybe some sort of cost based on their living to pay these workers for doing the laborers specifically?
Could you?
Like an hourly cost where they could just work the number of hours that they wanted to pay for their life and continued existence?
The answer is yes, but here's the question then. How do you have enough surplus value to pay for the guy who yells at them? Because
it just feels like you're coming up with a more complicated hourly wage.
Not really. The answer is you can never do that. Because think about the premise of your question. Can we figure out a way to pay them a wage that would run cost neutral for them? The answer is yes. That's what already happens. Because the real trick of it is nobody cares. So whatever wage is paid is already going to run cost neutral. That's the real fucking dampener. Again, these are antagonistic classes of people. So the wage they are paid is built on the efficiency that they perform. But the problem is, if the fucking worker is paid a wage where he gets a fair amount of value, that means he gets to keep all his surplus value. Because if any dollar goes above that, he's not getting paid what he's worth, is he? Now you can argue then, like you did, what have we paid him at cost? But the other trick of that is, if I'm the guy who works and extracts his labor, the fuck do I care if he gets paid at his cost? That's his problem, not mine. So that doesn't happen. That's never happened. In fact, they fought very hard to make sure it didn't come close to happening very recently. That's what the minimum wage is for. It's ostensibly to be to cover those costs.
Yes.
But again, we run into another problem. How do you actually determine that? What is the quote-unquote cost? I agree that cost of living fucking studies can help, but they're an average. They don't actually tell you what each individual worker costs per day.
Right, because the worker with 5 kids obviously costs a lot more than the worker who lives alone.
Right. So what are they going to do? They're always going to drive it to the worker who lives alone, and if you got 5 kids, fuck you deal. That's the system. That's the class antagonism. Because meanwhile, the CEO may not have kids or he may have 20 kids. It doesn't fucking matter. He works at the top, he extracts the surplus value and says, fuck you to the rest.
Again, it just feels like this should be the role of a government to regulate, I don't know, a minimum income and
Well,
to
that
maybe
is-
tailor that minimum income a little bit better to the cost of these workers. But
Yes.
obviously that's not happening. So like again, for the millionth time on the podcast, obviously we're living in a fucking shitty hellscape. Like I
Correct.
fucking get it. I really do. Like you guys don't need to try and convince me of that particular aspect
I
of
have
it.
stopped trying to convince you of that.
It's just it's just the methods of controlling that shitty hellscape we live in.
Yeah, fundamentally, that's where a lot of us disagree with you. We can just do away with those. We don't have to socially agree to make the hellscape greener. We can just get rid of the hellscape. That's an option. That's always been an option. People just don't seem to
Feel
fucking
like
get
it's not.
it. It really is. The thing is this, right?
Listen, I'm the most
Fucking-
primed human being to believe you when you say things like this. I really am. Am I not?
Actually, you're the one who most often says I'm full of shit.
Exactly. And thus the problem arises.
Well, I mean, what you have to do is you have to think about it, right? What's the bias there? That the system is always going to be there, that it's eternal, that it's an abstract object, that it is not a set of complex social relations where people are making decisions and they can fucking say no. That's the belief. And if you hold that to be true, if you hold that circular tautology to be true, frankly, yeah, of course it is, because you can't envision it. You're not envisioning the thing. But it really is that it is that easy to describe. The decision is, do we allow them to do it or not? Now, you can argue, well, they're probably going to put up a fight. They absolutely will. When the actual fucking Russian Revolution happened, do you know who showed up to fucking put that shit down and failed? America. That was the red Soviets versus the fucking white Russians. That fucking happened. When that shit happened, we immediately dropped everything concerning World War I, and we're like, we got to go kill some fucking Russians. This communism shit's bad for us. Because they know that if that decision is made, game's over. So they got to make it really fucking hard for you to envision that game can be over. And they have a moneyed interest to do so, right? Because under their system, they have a lot of fucking money. They have a lot of fucking value stored up, and that value translates to a very real power. It would be, a really dumb fucking communist would be like, oh my god, the fucking drones don't matter. Drones absolutely fucking matter. Again, I'm a very material person. Like, that's why I have such a bitch about fucking anarchism. Because anarchism says we can fucking make that decision and we can fucking annihilate all these fucking sources of power, and then somehow, above and beyond that, ensure that nobody ever rises to that power. That's the fucking dichotomy. I don't believe that either. You look at what we live in, we essentially do live in a fucking form of anarchism, right? Yeah, there's a state, and the state sets some fucking rules, but ultimately, corporations are more and more allowed to do whatever the fuck they want. If the rules don't apply to everybody, that's kind of fucking how anarchism ends up looking, isn't it? That's what you call fucking warlords. There really is no functional difference between a CEO like Bezos and a fucking warlord.
You're talking about anarchism.
No, I'm talking about fucking anarchism.
All right.
Because that's where your theory ends, unfortunately. This is my beef with it. This is why I wouldn't jump on the anarchist team. Would I jump on it if communism were a thing? Sure. And if you need to drop, absolutely do so. But yeah, that's not a fucking pedantic thing. That's a real fucking problem. When you're coming out of capitalism and you're choosing between going into communism or anarchism, I'm going to take the communism. Yes, there's a state. Yeah, there's probably some form of hierarchy. God knows we're probably going to prefer communists to non-communists. That's built in. That's baked into the fucking system. But the alternative is to gamble, number one, that it happened everywhere all at once. Number two, that somebody else is just going to let it happen. That they're not going to see a fucking end of state structures. They're going to see an end of fucking state power. And they're going to see an end of a fucking military force to protect that interest. And they're not going to go right for the taking. The problem with anarchism is fucking that it pretends that all their capitalist nations are either annihilated at the same time or that they're going to fucking allow this. They fought the Soviets.
But Trotsky and Lenin bet on that too.
Yeah. I fucking didn't say it was perfect, did I? If you want to get to anarchism, you're going to have to go through some sort of fucking state,
I
ultimately.
mean, my main problem with it is that you make just as many leaps in logic as an anarchist would.
Okay, no, I don't. I really don't. You gonna fucking tell me that settler colonialism isn't a thing? You're gonna tell me that with a straight fucking face. That's the problem. You can bitch about all day, and you're right. It's not that anarchists aren't right about it. Again, I'm going to agree with an anarchist most often, but you're going to fucking pretend that if we got rid of fucking the American government, that Canada and fucking Mexico and Europe aren't going to fucking be fucking interested? Get the fuck out of town. That's ridiculous. That is truly ridiculous.
Yeah, but I mean that comes down to like if you believe that socialism is possible in one country or not. And again, a lot of communists would tell you that you're wrong about that fact. Which means
Yeah.
that a lot of communists would say, no, you have to have like world communism all at once, which isn't that far of a leap from what anarchists say.
Perpetual revolution. That's the third option there.
But yeah, again, you get your do you think that it's possible in one country, or is it always
possible? Yeah, I think plenty of countries have socialism in some active form.
Well, socialism versus communism. I mean, that's fair.
Do I think communism one country? Yeah, okay. It's number one, right? And again, I want to be very clear. Like, this is going to sound hypercritical, or it's going to come really close to sounding like anarchities, which is not my intent. But I fucking mean there's a reason I have chosen communism over anarchism. And it is entirely the material facts on the ground. Like, son, they got drones and nukes. Somebody's going to have to fucking deal with that shit. Anarchism works fucking perfect. And probably is the optimal form, the Lockean fucking vigilante or some abstraction from it, to protect the territory. Because guerrilla warfare works real fucking well, right? But the problem is, all that shit was invented before they had nukes. What are you going to do? You going to leave nuclear silos unattended because nobody feels like going in there? Yeah, unfortunately, you're going to have to deal with that problem. You're going to have to make it fucking viable to deal with. You're going to need a state to do that. At the very least, to fucking dismantle those systems. If you want me to be dead ass, the anarchists who are like, I'd love a nuclear power plant in my backyard. Motherfucker, if you tell me you want to be a fucking YouTuber, fuck you. Fuck you. Because no, you don't want a nuclear power plant in your backyard. That's a lot of fucking work that goes into those things. To produce commodity energy, that's a whole hell of a ton of labor. And you're going to have to get somebody in there to do it. But everybody's going to want to dick around and fucking do fucking fishing and fucking shit. Do fucking YouTube videos, spread fucking nudes. It doesn't fucking matter. You're all going to pick work that doesn't involve going to that nuclear power plant and risking your fucking life. It's fucking ridiculous to think otherwise. So you have to have something that makes that an attractive option. You have to have some kind of fucking incentive to do it. You know, this is where when you said you're going to have worker parades or whatever and shit, like nothing fucking pedantic. I mean, you have to fucking make it. You have to create a society where we live for the other. Anarchism cannot do that. Anarchism definitionally is a monadist philosophy. It is in contradiction with communism, right? That's a fucking real fucking contradiction. The idea that all these monads will fucking individually decide that they're going to go in and do that shit versus we have a society and you're living for the other so that you do feel some compulsion, some social compulsion to go into that nuclear power plant and make sure it doesn't go fucking nuclear so that you and your fucking kids don't get fucking radiation poisoning.
It sounds like you found Jimi Hendrix's guitar for your point.
I
love talking about nuclear power plants.
Because it's material. I get fucking aggravated with the Jimi Hendrix guitar, but do I not entertain it every single time because we are talking about a material thing? We're not talking about some dumbass abstraction. We're not getting fucking weird. We're talking about a very real thing. So fair's fair, right? Fair's fair.
I don't know if I've ever shared this story, but I've actually seen one of his guitars. They had them in display on Music Row in New York City. So I'm talking about something very real as well.
I said that though. I said that you were talking about something real. And this is one of those things that pisses me off about the anarchism versus fucking communism debate. It always devolves down. It always devolves down to fucking anarchists versus statists, and that is the fucking most reductive, useless fucking discourse. We're talking about very real problems, right? How do you get people to go into the fucking nuclear power plant? How do you ensure that they have fucking rights when they're in that nuclear power plant, that you haven't created de facto slaves, right? Let me give you an argument. Because it's very fair to say, like, okay, that would you could do it with slaves, but you wouldn't have fucking real communism with a fucking slave class. You're correct, right? So we can't do that. We know that's off the table, so we have to get them in there somehow.
They would just want to do it. I mean, that's what an anarchist would argue, at least.
That is what
Is
the
just
anarchists would argue.
that there would be enough people who want to do it because the reward for a functioning society is the fact that you get to live in effectively a significantly better society, and that people find pleasure in work, and that the people who would want to work in a nuclear power plant likely to decommission them because all of a sudden the demand on the grid would be a lot lesser, would be that you would feel pleasure in the fact that you're doing this hard, dirty work and making society a lot better. I mean, that's what they'd say. And they'd
Maybe.
say that, what?
I said maybe.
Well, I mean, that's, yeah. I mean, the problem is that that would then be up in the air. I mean, the answer to that question in terms of the actual grid, if you want to talk about it, is that all of a sudden the demand on the grid would be a whole lot lesser because there wouldn't be a lot of bullshit that would be pulling on, resources,
A lot
essentially.
less asshole cams, sure.
So the idea is supposed to be, well, then you can just, people would in the abstract be willing to do the work at a nuclear power plant to decommission it, knowing that it would be over eventually, and then we would just use other sources of energy.
Maybe. Again, what you're trying to overcome there is the ideological problem of the monad versus collective society. Anarchism is hostile to it. Not in any overt sense. Mind you, anarchists are not running around going, we should be shitting and pissing in the streets, we should be fucking burning things, whatever we want to burn things, we should be acting on every hedonistic impulse. That's not the anarchist argument, right? So I want to.
No, I mean, I guess the final point on that I would make is that they would say that lacking market incentives, people would want to work for the betterment of society because that'd be the only work left that would make sense to do at that point, and that pursuing a monadal pursuit of pleasure at that point in time would be to your own mental health's detriment because you'd actually fucking hate it.
The real question then becomes what comes next, because you have a contradiction that is insurmountable. You have to be simultaneously a pure monad and you simultaneously have to purely live for society. That's unsustainable. We're trying to do that now. And how's that turning out? The whole shit.
The idea is that it lacks the market, and lacking the market context would make that possible.
Honestly,
how would you prevent people from just fucking putting themselves in the market condition at that point? That's the thing I think would come up, is just that they'd be like, all right, we're going back to commodity exchange. Like they just fucking panic and their brains would break. I mean, I think that's really the main problem.
Because it's what they know. The closest to come to that was Project Cybersyn. I put that link up there. That you should read that sometime.
I've heard of it. No, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, that was in a South American country, right?
Yeah, one that we conveniently overthrew because it turns out alternatives to capitalism are not fucking welcome. But that's kind of the closest you do to bridging that gap between monad and collective society, where you do actually shift how resources are distributed. And they converted some, so it's doable. I should really read up on that more.
Spain did it. So
what's that?
I'm just joking. Spain managed to do it for a little while, and so did the kibbutzes. So
again, my problem is very real, isn't it? The problem is, what do? You either decay into it, or if you look at something like the Chaz of the Paris Commune, eventually everybody else gets bored of your dumb bullshit, and they walk in and take it back over. And they certainly crack skulls. So it works. It kind of works. But again, the real problem is that everybody else still exists and they're still on teams.
Right.
Whereas a socialist state with a communist party can defend itself. But the problem is if you live in a capitalist world, what happens? You're constantly being assailed. It's very easy to erode rights, as we've seen all fucking over. Let's not fucking kid ourselves. It's very easy to allow the erosion of rights out of fear. We do it here, and there's nothing to fear. So, These are real fucking problems. These are valid fucking questions, and they don't have easy answers.
We'll have to resolve that at some point.
We won't be alive for that resolution. I'll let you take solace in that fact.
Yeah, no, we won't be.
Our kids won't be alive. Our grandkids won't be alive. I mean, that's the other brutal part of it. If material conditions really do matter, right, then material conditions in country A that produce socialism are going to be different than B. So you're going to have inherent contradictions in that. And you're probably going to have in-group, out-group fighting yet again. So you're going to have a society that comes after communism, which I don't know. Or you're going to have a society that comes after anarchism. And I have used the pejorative form of that, but I genuinely don't know the answer to that one. I don't know what that'll look like. Nobody does. Anybody who says they do is full of shit.
And thus the cycle continues.
And thus the cycle continues, and class conflict and the historical fucking dialectic continues. And with that, this has been the Sons of Trier live streaming podcast. I was again Dan Cohen, joined by John Sinclair, Cenk, Engels, and Maeillory for another spirited round of fucking debates and some fucking nasty jokes. If you're on Twitter, you can follow me at KETZERN at Ketzeren. I'm the one with the fucking Millhouse Van Marks. You can follow True Horror, one of our podcasters decided he's too good for the Friday Theory Cast, at True Horror 69. And you can, that's all one word, by the way. There's nothing cute there.
He's the real genius here.
He's got us all beat. And he's a strong fucking, I don't know if he labors or works. I'll have to ask him. And of course, we are. You can follow at Maeillory, if I could spell, at Maeillory on Twitter, and fucking boost our follower counts. That would be wonderful. If you watch this on Facebook.com/SoTrierCast, thank you. If you watch it on Twitch TV, Twitch.tv/Sons of Trier, or you are joining our Patreon at Patreon.com/Sons of Trier. A big fucking thank you. You're really helping us out. Please spread
Next
the
week
word.
we'll even do it from a hot tub.
We might even do it from a hot tub if we can just find a place to rent a hot tub. So yeah, good night, and enjoy it.
Night.
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 Night night.
Anybody who needs